Welcome into the MPW Digital Pregame Show presented by Walk-Ons Sports Bistreaux. I'm Neal McCready. Ole Miss plays host to Tulane Saturday at 6:30 p.m. at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. The 20th ranked Rebels are 2-0 on the season after a 54-17 win over Austin Peay this past Saturday in Oxford. Tulane, meanwhile, is 1-1 on the campaign, having lost a 40-35 decision to Oklahoma and defeated Morgan State this past Saturday in Birmingham. Today on the show, we'll break down X's and O's with MPW Digital's resident football expert Pete DeWeese. We'll visit with Tulane wide receivers coach Jeff Conway about Saturday's game and the challenges the Green Wave have faced in relocating to Birmingham in the wake of Hurricane Ida. We'll also talk SEC, National College, and NFL with the next round's Ryan Brown, Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 ESPN in Memphis, and Barstool Sports' Ben Mintz. We'll also hear from Ford Center Director Julia Aubrey, who sat down with RebelGrove.com's Chase Parham on Thursday. That conversation is presented by Visit Oxford. But first, a word about Walk-Ons. Walk-Ons Sports Bistreaux puts everything they've got into bringing you game day with a taste of Louisiana. Dig into their mouth-watering Louisiana cuisine like po' boys, gumbo, and voodoo shrimp, plus fan favorites like juicy burgers and fresh salads. Quality fresh ingredients you can't help but crave. Coming soon in November, it's Walk-Ons Sports Bistreaux, more than a restaurant, 1737B University Avenue in Oxford. Walk-Ons Sports Bistreaux creates an environment that fosters growth and belonging for all, where the team is bigger than the individual, where they exceed expectations and positively impact every community they serve. Think you have what it takes to bring people together and provide a memorable game day experience? Visit 720 Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland to join the Walk-Ons team today. Walk-Ons Sports Bistreaux, more than a restaurant. So we'll start off with Pete DeWeese. He and I sat down on Wednesday night to look ahead to Tulane at Ole Miss. I think you all will enjoy this. It's been a big hit. I think you'll enjoy this session as well. Here's Pete. Pete DeWeese, our resident football expert, kind enough to spend yet another evening with us, getting us ready for Ole Miss and Tulane Saturday night. Pete, good to talk to you. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here.
I love the cap. I've already told you that. I'm not even a Grateful Dead guy, but I want the cap, so
appreciate it.
It's very good. All right. Ole Miss beat Austin Peay. They won by 37. It was 37-0. The game, unless you care to dive into Austin Peay, I think we can move on to Tulane.
Yeah, no, I think, the only takeaway to me from Austin Peay is the stuff that Kiffin's already addressed and things you guys have written about and everybody else has said. I think the biggest thing from my perspective was I think Ole Miss went really simple. When you only practice for one day, you run your base stuff, right? So from an offensive and defensive standpoint, I don't think they spent a whole lot of time getting too technical in game plan because they couldn't. That changes this week. You get a full week of practice. And some of the things that Tulane does, that you have to be sharp, and they're gonna require you to be detail oriented, especially on when you're playing defense. And so I think game plan will look different this week, and it'll be it should be a good game Saturday.
So let's dive into Tulane. Willie Fritz has done a great job there. The quarterback, Pratt, is a really solid player. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. They've got some talent on the roster, not a ton, but it's not an SEC talent roster, but it's a talented roster. He's got a culture. You and I were talking about your high school team. Building culture is important. Tulane has built culture. There's no doubt about that. I guess I'll let you. I'll kind of hand the reins off to you here. Tell me how you kind of want to do this, but take us through what we need to look for with Oklahoma. Tulane. I was thinking about Oklahoma, because Tulane gave Oklahoma all they wanted that day in Norman. What do we need to look for with Ole Miss and Tulane and Oxford?
I think I think there's a few things. First of all, you talked about Willie Fritz, and he is very respected in the coaching community. The guy has won a ton of ball games. He's done it at different places. He's shown the ability to be successful and get a lot of things done. I think when I think of Tulane, and this may be a really awful analogy, but they're Vanderbilt with a better recruiting base. right? You have an academic piece that you have to meet. But you also have a better recruiting base, and that's not a knock on the ball on Tennessee, but what you can recruit in Louisiana, in East Texas, throughout the panhandle, as you dip over into Florida, is a different kid and a more readily available kid than maybe what you can get in Nashville. And so, so I think there's a thing there where, you know, they're limited in who they can get in some ways because of some of the academic piece, probably. I don't know anybody that's ever coached there, but I know guys that I know that have been at Vandy and Georgia Tech and Duke and those places, Wake Forest. I know what it looks like for them, right? I know the game has to be played a little bit differently. And so Tulane battles that, but sitting where they are in Louisiana, it's a great place to recruit to, right? I mean, come on, you bring a kid to New Orleans for an official visit, who's not going to enjoy themselves?
Yeah, it's a fun place. Sure.
It is, right? But I think the other thing to remember about them being a Vanderbilt with a better recruiting base is Vanderbilt might sign 3 or 4 really good players a year, right? But then they have to go play teams that have 30 or 40 of those kids. Tulane can sign 3 or 4, and they go play teams that might only have 3 or 4. Yeah. So they're able to when they're doing things well, they're able to kind of gain a bit of a modicum of success that allows it to build and grow, where at Vanderbilt, it's very hard to capitalize and maintain success, right? And I think Fritz has done a great job with that culture and with recruiting base. And then the other thing that he's really done a good job of, you know, Will Hall's name is gone across the message board a few thousand times, I think, in the past few years. And for good reason. Will's a really sharp football coach, and people know, you know, people in the industry know what he does, and he's good. But Will leaves and he finds Chip Long, right? Fritz does a great job building a staff of young guys that are growing and willing to buy into the culture and do it his way, but also getting some guys that are established, that are really good coaches as well as accomplished recruiters, and he's getting them to come down there and join him. So I think he's done a really good job at a program that a lot of people probably don't think a lot about if they're outside of the immediate area, maybe outside of that conference. But then suddenly they go to Norman, right? And the thing about that game is I don't really know how to judge it because I don't know really what Oklahoma is.
That's what I wanted to ask you too, is what do you, when you look at that game, Oklahoma had it under complete control, and then do you look at it as Oklahoma took their foot off the gas and lost focus and it got squirrely, or do you view it as Tulane figured some things out and you know, a combination thereof?
I think there's always that combination thereof, right? I think that those Tulane kids, I think they play with a lot of pride. That's part of that culture that he has built. And you look at the circumstance, right? It's supposed to be a home game. Home is now in bad shape, right? And there's a lot of your fan base, a lot of your family, people are displaced, and they get bounced to Alabama. They practiced at UAB, and I think they practiced in Tuscaloosa.
They've been in Birmingham for 3 weeks,
3 weeks, right?
Weeks. Yeah.
So they get on the plane and they go to Oklahoma, and they have every intention of showing up and playing with pride and representing New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. And, you know, Oklahoma puts the wave on the field and you've got all that going. That's only going to get you so far, right? But when you blend good coaching, solid talent, and all of that pride and all of that emotion, it had a chance for Tulane to come in and be that perfect storm for them to play well. And they didn't play perfect. But again, good coaching and enough good players, you can give a team problems. And for all that Oklahoma is and all that Lincoln Riley is, what they have accomplished or not accomplished in the past few years has been talked about nationally, right? I mean, they haven't historically been great on defense in the last several years, right? And they're improving, but Tulane certainly took them to the wall a little bit and challenged them. And then I think on the flip side of that, I think you're right. I think Oklahoma got up, and Oklahoma's a young football team that lost a lot of good players from last year, right? And they get up a little bit, and then here comes Tulane not going away, and Oklahoma had to kind of wake back up a little bit. And that's a very real thing early in the season as well.
I always make the edger analogy, like a weed eater.
Mm-hmm.
You start your weed eater and it gets going and you get it rolling, and you turn it off because maybe you need to switch attachments, or you whatever, something comes up, and 20 minutes later you go to start it again.
Yep.
And the same damn thing just won't start.
Yep. Yeah.
Sometimes a football team's that way.
It's listen, when the switch gets turned off, it's very hard to turn back on. It really is. And that's a real thing on the sideline, especially with young teams. It's hard at the NFL level, but even in college, and Lord, especially at the high school level, it's a very, very hard thing to do. Yeah. But that's why, and I think you may have actually said this. I got to listen to a couple of the podcasts last week. And I think you may have said it is Saban is who he is and gets paid what he gets paid, not because of all the wins, but because he can take the sloppy win against Northeast Directional State and win by 70, and it's never good enough, because that's the process that he has built and the culture that he has built, right? And he's going to use those games to always prove a point that you can be better. And that's where a team like Oklahoma, right, is still trying to grow. And so that one's hard, man. I wish I had a better feel for who Tulane really was after that game, but I can't look at either team. I can tell you they're both good football teams, and I can tell you on any Saturday, Oklahoma or Tulane can show up and give you a game. But I don't. It's hard to really know who they are, and so I'm interested to see when Tulane rolls into Oxford this weekend. What they look like, because one thing I can tell you, and it's again, part of the culture that Willie Fritz has established down there, is they're not going to roll in afraid, right?
Oh, no, absolutely.
They have spent time looking at some of that second half against Louisville. They spent time watching some of the deep balls that were thrown on Ole Miss last week from that Austin Peay team. And that's what they're talking to their kids about, right?
Yeah, the fact that they've taken the helmet and, they planned this weeks ago with the SEC thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's playful and it's funny, and I saw it and I'm like, that's great.
I did. I thought it was great.
It's football. I mean, it's supposed to be fun, but it also tells you that it's also their way of telling their own kids, hey, look, we're not scared.
Yep. Oh, I agree. And look, I'm like Chase. I've got an Angry Wave shirt. When they released that logo, I went out and found one, man, because it's great. It really is.
I'm looking at it on my computer right now. It is a superb logo. It is so beautiful.
Good. And look, I'm not old enough to have done it, but I know when you talk to people when they played in old Tulane Stadium, right, and even when the Saints were playing in old Tulane Stadium, and you talk to people that went to games there, they'll tell you it wasn't ever the nicest place, but there was something about the stadium. My dad used to say all the time, he went to several games down there, that it had a feel to it. It was the metal bleachers. And, it's kind of like the nostalgia some people have for Birmingham. I mean, that stadium is what that stadium is now, but at one time when that place was rocking, it was loud, and those steel bleachers were loud, and there's so much going on. And I think, that going back to when they were in the SEC to when they left and then moving on, there's always been some pride with that program. I think even when they were in their real down years. So, but they're not down anymore.
So I think you want to start with Tulane's offense.
So honestly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on their offense, and we're not going to talk a ton about their defense. The one thing I think, that a lot of Ole Miss fans would look at coming out of last week, I think people still want to talk about the offensive line. And we talked about that last week, and, PFF or whatever has their beliefs, and then Kiffin clearly has his, right?
Kiffin was not going to do the rat poison thing this week. I mean, Kiffin went in with a very clear messaging plan, and I actually respect this. He went in with day one going, we are talking up Tulane and talking down my team. I got to make sure that my team is not looking at the AP rankings and looking at that was That was Nick Saban, 3 years of Nick Saban coming out in Lane Kiffin this week.
Two of the hardest things to do in turning around a program, and it doesn't matter what level you do it at. Step one is you have to teach or remind kids how to win. Okay. Last year, they experienced some losses and they experienced some wins that showed them what it takes to win. Yeah. The next step of that is even harder. And that is not now teaching or reminding them how to win, but it's teaching and reminding them how they got there and not to be complacent, right? Because it's the rat poison. It's such a great term because Ole Miss is still a young football team. They're still an inexperienced football team. You still have a lot of guys out there that are yet to really show themselves on a big stage, right? And so he's going to play up to that, but he also knows, Kiffin knows if this is a close game, his best from a media standpoint, from a projection standpoint, is to hype up Tulane, right? And if it's not a close game, then it's even easier to say, hey, that's a great football team, and we just got on.
Yeah, he's got a team that whipped Louisville. Realistically, yeah. They whipped Louisville, and they absolutely pummeled Austin Peay in the part of the game that it mattered. And so, and the AP poll and the coaches poll have you at 17, and some of this stuff's happening, and people are talking about Matt Corral as a Heisman candidate, and all of these things are happening, and it's new. It hasn't happened in the Ole Miss program since 2016, and so you've got to be able to tell kids, hey, look, I get it, but these guys. I mean, the best thing that ever happened for Lane Kiffin was Tulane came back and scared the hell out of Oklahoma, because he can show them that scoreboard and go, okay, well, if your ranking means something, if you think you're big shit because you're 17, Oklahoma's 3.
You have to temper expectations inside and outside of your locker room. That's just reality. You have to build confidence, right? But you have to temper expectations at the same time. And I'm with you. I 100% think that's been a focus this week. One thing I think we all expect when we talk about Ole Miss is we expect offensively for them to be successful, right? They're going to have their bad games. There was the Arkansas debacle last year, and even the LSU game where you had the miscues at the end. But the bottom line is points were still scored, yards were still produced between the players on the field, the head coach and the offensive coordinator, and the rest of that staff. They do a good job putting a plan together and attacking people. Right. And Oklahoma was certainly able to put a plan together and attack. So we know it can be done. So when you talk about Tulane's defense, I think the big thing to kind of, when I watch them, they operate from both a 3 and a 4-man surface. So sometimes they're 3 down linemen, sometimes they're 4. The kind of funny thing is when they're in their 4-man front, they stand their ends up a lot. So it almost looks like, oh, they're playing with 2 down linemen. Well, really, they've asked those defensive ends to stand up. They're going to do some different things with them, move them around, try to put them in position to see some things. But when you watched Oklahoma, they would go back and forth kind of between those 2 defensive structures. Almost every snap that I could see on the television copy, they're playing with what's called the 2-high shell. So they're keeping 2 safeties deep. And then on the snap of the ball, a lot of times one of them is rotating. So they end up in a cover 3 or cover 1 look. But what they're doing coverage-wise, there's not a ton of difference between what you're seeing from Tulane coverage-wise and really what the rest of the college football world is doing now. I mean, there's 5 DBs on the field almost all the time, and they're playing different quarters games, and they're doing different things to kind of match and rotate. They will bring pressure. You watch them against Oklahoma. There's downs where they're bringing a corner off the edge. There's times where the nickel is removed and suddenly comes from space and tries to get there. I thought against Oklahoma, there were some times where Oklahoma does a really good job at the receiver position of attacking leverage and creating space. And they were able to take advantage of that in the passing game. That's something that we've seen the Ole Miss offense do since Kiffin and Levy got there. And so I think that's something that they look at on film. Oklahoma had some success running the ball, But I think the Tulane front is a solid front. There, it's not going to be easy for Ole Miss to just line up and run it down their throat. But I think really where this game will be won or lost, for the most part, will be when Tulane's on offense. They do a really nice job. They're solid up front on the offensive line. But the big thing is when I watch them is they're creative and efficient, right? They find ways to get big plays, but they do a really good job of doing what's called staying on schedule. Rarely against Oklahoma was it 2nd and 10 or 2nd and 9. You felt like it was 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7, where now whether you get the first down or you end up in a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, rarely were they in very long down and distance. And that's where they want to be. They do a nice job. They mix outside runs with inside runs. They'll do it with motion. They'll do it by creating gaps in the formation. They really do some interesting things. I thought that they did a good job, mixing easy throws and then downfield throws together. I didn't necessarily see them trying to take a ton of shots down the field, but they are definitely taking those intermediate, the crossing routes and the digs and post routes that will get you the chunk yardage, right? But maybe not get you the 50, 70 yards, hashtag score from far, right? Not that those things aren't in. Every offense has them. But they do a really nice job of layering things in the passing game and giving them to the quarterback. And he's a good player. He made some mistakes against Oklahoma, and obviously a good defense is going to force a quarterback into some mistakes. But he showed the ability to do some things both in the run game and as a passer that can make them tough. What I really wanted to kind of focus on was Tulane uses a lot of compressed sets and a lot of motion to create gaps and stress. And we talked a little bit about this with Louisville and how they would do it. But the way that Tulane does it in some ways is different from what Louisville did. So much of what we saw last.
You're talking about people bunched up,
bringing guys in closer to the formation.
Gotcha.
So we're going to look at some of the formations and the schemes that they used against Oklahoma, and to talk about why it's effective and why offenses do these things to attack. Again, I have no idea how Ole Miss is going to line up defensively, so I'm kind of giving you a base, a type alignment, something that fits into perhaps their scheme and what they might want to do. But so, when we talk about compressed sets, they will take these guys and they may put all of these receivers within 4 to 5 yards of the offensive lineman. There's times where they're even tighter, where you're talking about maybe 1.5 yards between the tackle and this tight end, and then maybe 1 yard or 1.5 yards between that tight end and receiver, right? And they've got several different things that I've kind of seen them do out of this formation. I made notes of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different concepts out of this one formation that you saw them do. Okay. When you compress formations like this, it's just another way of attacking the defense, right? So often you see, Ole Miss will put those receivers way out here, and they're trying to create width and they're trying to create all this space to let guys go operate. And it's a method of doing things. It's a great way of doing things. The opposite of that is to take everybody and put them in the box. If these receivers were out here by the numbers, you have one gap that you've created, and the defense has to identify a defender to occupy that gap. Once you bring these guys close to the party, you've now have that same gap, but you've now added 2 additional gaps that have to be accounted for in the run game. And a lot of teams want to do that by adding a tight end, by adding a wing. Tulane will do it with tight ends. They'll do it with receivers. They'll do it with wings. They'll do it with everybody on the offense. Okay. So when you bring these guys in and you start, sprinkling in run game and passing game, it allows you, it's another way to create layers and to attack the defense. So not only have you created gaps that you make them account for now in the run game that you don't have to worry about when this guy's out here, right? You now by asking one of these, secondary players to now be a run fitter, you also put him in a bind where now he has to be physical against the run, but also has to be able to attack whatever route structure he might see. So there's a lot of different things offenses can do. The other thing, when you bring guys in close like this and you start adding motion elements to it, things happen real fast. So it goes back to some of the conversations we've had about how fast guys have to communicate and things they have to do.
Because of numbers. The numbers on one half changed. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, I think one of the first plays of the game for Tulane against Oklahoma, they came out in this exact set and they just ran plain zone read like you've seen a 1,000 times throughout college football. And they put these receivers in a position to go block now, but it's a nice safe call because you can see how is the defense going to play one of our, solid kind of base formations. So now as this tailback gets into his downhill run path and that quarterback is reading this outside with the chance to pull it, now, you've created these two extra gaps where, again, you have to account for them defensively, right? And so as you show flow away from the quarterback with the offensive line and tailback, you now have these two gaps backside where someone, whether it's this outside defender, the defensive end, or this linebacker, somebody has to be accountable for the quarterback now. And because you're giving him blockers there as well, then it just, again, it's constantly playing that numbers game and working on that chess match a little bit.
You might be about to get into this. I'm curious. Against Louisville, Ole Miss used a lot of Chance Campbell as essentially a shadow that's probably not the right word, with Cunningham, where he just was he ran where he ran. Do you anticipate Ole Miss doing some of that with Pratt?
So it wouldn't surprise me, on passing situations, especially, you saw a ton of that, right, out of Ole Miss. It wouldn't surprise me in the run game. Ole Miss plays a lot of four eyes with these defensive ends, defensive tackles, whatever you want to call them. So that means those guys line up on the either head up or inside eye of that tackle. Typically, when you play that technique, what you're actually doing is you're putting your eyes, and different people teach it different ways. But what a lot of people teach is that their eyes are going to be actually on this guard. So if I'm this end, okay, I'm reading this guard. And if I'm this linebacker, I'm reading this guard. If I see the guard step here towards the nose, the end is going to immediately fit into his gap.
Okay.
When the Mike sees that, he knows this end is going to now basically close that gap so he can potentially scrape over the top based on the flow of the offense, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that they were doing with him, was they were letting these four eyes win with speed and technique and allowing him now, okay, if the ball does get handed, you work tight off of it right here. And if the quarterback pulls it, we have a quarterback player. But also if the ball cuts back, we have a potential cutback player, right? So there's a lot of games that they can play. At the same time, they have to be prepared for when they get this and this guard steps out. Now this end has to fight outside, and now he's got to get here and trust him to get here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different, kind of variables depending on really how the front is structured. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I think when you study defensive football that you have to understand is where you align and potentially move these guys has to be tied in to the coverage. If the coverage is not connected to the front, that's where you see teams get busted for big gains and different things. Because if the front is telling this guy he's here and he's here, then that means he has to be here. Well, if the coverage is not tied to that and you're telling this guy something about his coverage has to be here, you've just negated a run gap if he makes a bad read. So when your coaches talk about bad eyes, well, if he's supposed to be getting a read and he reads the wrong thing and he turns and works flat, he just negated his run gap. So all those things have to be linked together. So it would not shock me with the use of the four eyes to see them getting Campbell backside, right? But with as active as they are in the run game and the different things that they do, I wouldn't be surprised to see them using him front side as well. But so like I said, they opened up, and they opened up simple. They opened up with that zone read. Okay. You also saw in the game at one point, they moved the tailback back here and they put him in the pistol, and now they ran stretch. They like to put this guy back here and run stretch. They'll turn, and he's here. And again, they've created gaps now in the run game where they can account for hats on the play side, and they're going to try to attack those 4-eye line defensive ends, and they're going to try to work these combos. And if they can win at these spots right here and do enough to nullify these overhangs, you have a chance for a good run play, because numbers wise, you have a little bit of an advantage.
Because in this case, if the strong safety doesn't get there and make a play,
it could be a big one.
He's running for a while.
And it's one of those where if he goes inside and the ball goes here, if the corner doesn't do a good job of leveraging the ball back inside, you've now put that strong safety in a real difficult place to make a tackle in space. If that corner just blindly runs upfield or gets expanded, now where you want that safety to make a tackle in a phone booth, he's now having to make it in the middle of the interstate. And that's a lot harder. It doesn't matter who you are. So they'll do some things like that. They'll work the same stretch concept with the back being offset like this. Again, early in the game against Oklahoma, they took this guy and they motioned him over late. And instead of giving the quarterback a run threat, they gave him a simple RPO. So they run stretch back this way, away from where the motion came from. And they have a little flat RPO out here where now you're building leverage here to go block these guys, right? And it's all about, do I have numbers and leverage? If these guys are down tight and being aggressive, he's probably handing that ball off. If he gets any cushion right there, or this corner's maybe deeper and inside, right? Well, now, then, he's going to throw that ball, and he's going to let that guy make the play in space. And it's a concept we've seen Ole Miss use. I mean, they did it last year with Yavoah. They did it last year with Elijah. They've done it this year. Drummond scored on it a couple times. They've done it with the tight ends this year. So it's something, it's not different. Ole Miss, I don't think RPOs it as much as they call it a lot of times. Here it looks like a true, RPO. If your decision as a defensive coordinator is to take this Viper, this outside linebacker, safety, whatever you want to call him, and put him here, well, now you have to adjust your front to be here. Otherwise, you negate that gap. So again, as a quarterback, it's very easy for me as he motions across to just look, hey, do I have leverage? Do I have numbers? If I do, throw it. If not, I'm going to give it to my tailback, because now in theory, I've created some type of a statistical advantage back the other direction. And so, they do, again, real simple things, but it's just a smart chess match, right? Okay, where are you putting your guys? We're going to take advantage of where it's not. Okay. One of the other big ones that you see from them is just a simple mesh concept. It's something that, Ole Miss has elements of mesh in their offense. Alabama does. Mike Leach has about 9 different elements of mesh. But essentially, without remembering exactly what the routes were here, typically what's happening in this concept is one of these front side players is going to do one of two things. In the traditional mesh concept, he would be on a corner route or an out route. You would have a back into the flat, and now this tight end and one of these guys are working the rub over the middle. And now on the backside, you're either putting a guy in the flat or putting him on a corner route or whatever the case may be. And that's kind of the traditional way that the play was run. And it's kind of evolved a little bit over the years and how they do things. And I'll show you that here in just a second, because as best I can tell, Tulane carries at least 3 or 4 different versions of this concept in their passing game. And they use them all against Oklahoma. Because, what you're doing, is, again, you're creating different levels of the offense. You're creating a pyramid, right? If you're working to create this pyramid, and you have, just as an example, him on the corner, him in the flat, and this guy coming across, you create this triangle right here. that makes it an easy read for the quarterback, right? If he gets pushed out the backside, you've created some type of a horizontal stretch here where now if anybody's out of position or has chased, you potentially catch this guy coming open on the backside. So like I said, they've got a couple of different ways they do it, but that's one of the things is, naturally when guys, when they bring you in offensively, they start spraying guys back to the outside. And a lot of times it's to now find a soft spot, whether it's here or here. One of the third down concepts that they used against Oklahoma was, I called it smash cop, which is just some kind of football jargon, but in reality, I don't necessarily think it's what they were doing. But basically, one of these guys went to the flat. So let's say he's there, and then this guy went to the corner. Okay, so if you're playing a cover 2 defense, you've built in a nice high-low on this corner where if he takes this, you potentially can take this corner route. If the corner bails, you can take the out route potentially for the easy throw. Okay. What they do on top of that is from the back side. And what I believe they did was they ran a little rub or switch concept on the back side. They had this guy fake like an out route and then pivot and come back underneath. And as he went out on his release, on that spray release they talk about, he stacked underneath him, went here to the post or dig. So again, what you've done now is
that play is going to take a little time to develop, isn't it?
So it takes a little bit of time, maybe not as much as you think, right?
Okay.
Because what ends up happening is the quarterback's eyes are going to be here. They're going to start there. And he's going to get some coverage indicators that tell him early sometimes, hey, it's not there. So I'm going to progress backside a little bit quicker.
Okay.
But if he gets the right look, that's where the ball can easily come out to either of those guys, right? As soon as this Y releases, this Z is going to come underneath him, push. And then, if I had to guess, they're telling him to run this post. And then what he got out of Oklahoma was he was forced to flatten this route off. And this is where the ball ended up going in the concept. Because what's happened now, okay, when you press these guys again, it changes leverage for defenders. So this corner route is going to, if they're playing anything that's a too high look, this corner is going to pull the safety off the hash. So what you're trying to do now, if you can get this guy to move with the outside stem here, or if you can get him to backpedal when he's getting attacked vertically and then cross his face, you're now going to occupy the space that this safety just left, right? So you're moving one chess piece to bring another guy in behind him, okay? This other little route, this little outside route that whips back underneath serves multiple purposes. One, it's a good man-to-man beater. If you choose to play man-to-man on that guy, and guys, if you watch the Monday Night Football game, whether you were watching the Manning cast or watching the other, Renfro, since he was at Clemson to now, is working all these type little whip routes and return routes and getting paid big money to do it because the kid's really savvy. It's the same stuff Wes Welker does. Antonio Brown did a ton of it when he was in Pittsburgh. You find the right guy on those routes and you use them because it's hard to cover man-to-man.
You clear out the underneath. He beats his man by a couple of steps, and there he is. It's an easy throw.
That's exactly what it is. And they like building these elements in. I'll show you another concept here in a second where they build these little jerk elements, these little double move type elements, so that if you're playing man-to-man or even if you're playing zone, if that action gets him to expand and soften, right, and this guy expands or and then you marry that with the other route that has pulled this guy out of there. Pardon my drawing. My mouse is going crazy tonight. You open up that window so that as he works back inside, you give an easy check down to the quarterback that has a chance to turn and run. Okay. So it's a lot of smart, simple elements that can really stress defenses. They've also, I saw them run just some naked bootleg type stuff, whether it was out of the pistol, right? But you bring this guy this way, you bring him back across into the flat, this time not on motion, but on the run, And then you do some things structure, whether you're clearing him out and putting him on a little out route, and it's just an old school flood concept like everybody in America's run. You can push him on some type of a comeback and put him on a corner or even a little pivot route, and you can create different levels and do different things. So it's a really nice way when you bring all these guys in to make defenses have to adjust and kind of manage things a little bit differently. Another way would be just to line up now in bunch, right? Instead of being 2x2, you put 3 receivers on the same side, and they'll do it with 1 tight end and 3 receivers. They'll also do it with 2 tight ends, essentially a tight end and a fullback. Again, when they're in the pistol, they love to run toss sweep. But they've also come out with this stuff, and they'll do what's called some spacing concepts. They will put you in some type of a horizontal stretch where, the kind of traditional spacing is that you put a guy here, and his job is to either occupy that linebacker or replace him. So if that backer blitzes or drops, you replace him, settle, you're open, get the ball, right? If he's in coverage and he walls you, then you're keeping him from expanding, which in theory opens somebody else up. So in the traditional concept, he may go there. He is going to push here at just a slightly deeper depth. And then I'm going to create the stretch by now putting this guy into the flat. So now what I've done is I've put this guy or whoever is responsible for that intermediate area in a bind, right?
Who's the quarterback's first read on that? Is it the mic?
So different people do it differently, okay? It depends on who you talk to. If you talk to Sean Payton, you talk to West Coast guys, they're going to read it differently than some of the other guys, right? You go back to Bill Walsh and those guys, a lot of times their first read would actually be here to a guy that was split wider, and it's Jerry Rice on that slant route.
Yeah.
His second read would be here, and his third read would now actually be all the way out here. There are other people that read the front side first. Some people read it inside out, some people read it outside in, and everybody has little nuances to how the routes are run and how, based on how they read it. One of the kind of versions that's become very popular, that is one that I believe I've seen Tulane do, is they will put him in the flat right now. So you create an immediate stress on the corner. You put him in that same over the ball spot route, and you bring this guy right off his tail, and he's now going to look to settle away from the defender in this little stick route. So again, you're getting to the same landmarks, you're doing a lot of the same things, but you're just finding different ways to stress that defense.
And in that, the tailback, I would assume, is the bailout option at the end.
So a lot of times, if they're doing this, then the tailback is going to be here going opposite.
Okay.
And he may be working, if this guy's tight, he may be working a little stick route right there. If he's not tight, this guy, if he's out wider, he may be working a snag, which is basically the same thing this guy's doing. And then some guys will even do some kind of downfield intermediate type stuff. There's a lot of things you can do from this set, even down the field pressure stuff, right? And really trying to stress the defense, but they really do a good job of trying to work all those underneath concepts when they bunch these guys up. One of the ones that this one, and I thought this was a really well done variation right here. And there's elements of the play I showed you before in this that kind of tie in together. So Joe Brady and LSU in the national championship years, a few years ago, they made a ton of success working what's known as a drive concept. And what they would do is on the front side of the concept, they would bring this receiver split down, and they would a traditional smash concept, like people have been running in football for 50 years. So you get a guy in the flat, a guy here, and it's a very easy read the flat defender. If he turns and bails, you're going to throw it to this guy unless somebody has leverage to run with him. If the flat defender is here, you're looking to throw it here unless somebody has leverage to run with him.
Right? It's going to be hard for that free safety to get there.
It can be. Again, it's all about coverage structure. If you're not bringing this guy, you can bracket this and get him out on the tailback.
Yeah. Now you shrink the window.
You shrink the window, and now if he wants to run a post or something, you're still protected.
Gotcha.
Because it doesn't have to be a corner route. But you've just committed 3/2. So now where are you going to gain your numbers on the backside? Right. So traditionally, from a normal just offensive alignment, you're always going to have one player works what typically is known as a drive dig here, one player working the shallow route right here, and then typically a player out here that works a little in route. Okay. So you're building layers so that as the quarterback starts with his eyes to the right on this smash concept, if everything gets evaded, you're bringing routes into his vision. So he doesn't have to turn and get all the way to the back side of the concept. You're bringing things to him. Well, at this point, it's very hard for these linebackers to be right. If they take the bait and they jump here, you've opened up space behind them with the dig route. If they maintain depth and they play here, then you get it to this free runner on the shallow route that now has a chance to go make a play. So they had a nice variation of it against Oklahoma where they got in this bunch, but they were looser. These guys were probably 7 or 8 yards from the offensive tackle, not in real tight. But again, you've still compressed bodies. So you haven't necessarily gained run gaps. But when you do that, now you commit the defense, you have to get 3 over there. So now as a defense, you're committing, okay, I've got 3 guys over here to protect this. If I choose to keep 3 over here and maintain this advantage, I've just put a lot of stress on these guys. I also now am committed to a 3-man rush, right? If I only commit 2 guys to this side, let's say that they blitz him and you commit just these 2 over here. Okay, now the offense has a man advantage where talent and skill can win potentially, and you've still created stress. So you're building numbers in a way that you know, again, it's just that constant chess match. Well, what Tulane did, they put him on the corner, they put him in the flat just like normal. And then where they played the game that I thought was interesting was here with these 3. Okay. They outside released him on that same little jerk route that I showed you a second ago, where he comes back inside. They brought him underneath here to get into this dig window. Okay. And what they did with this guy, instead of putting him on a straight shallow, they took that jerk element and added it back. So this guy, he starts inside, and as he identified who's responsible for me, and he realized it's this linebacker. Well, in theory, my slot receiver is more athletic than that linebacker. So what he did was he put the brakes on like he was going to go back outside, got him to hesitate, and then right back underneath. Wes Welker and Tom Brady made a killing off this, a version of this called Hoss Y Juke. Okay. What they did was they took the juke route, that little stutter, show him going back outside, and then accelerate back across his face. And they built it into another traditional passing concept. So if you isolate your backers on this little juke route, it's an athlete in space now, so that, you know, if he's part of the concept here, or if he's part of your pressure here, you've isolated the mic now on what's probably one of your best players. And the double move that's very subtle. It's very fast. It's not like a downfield double move. It gives the quarterback a quick place to still go with the football and puts a lot of stress on the defender. It's a very nice wrinkle for taking the modern concept and adding a little bit of subtlety and a little bit more to it. You know, this was a play that blew up on Twitter when they ran it. You know, railroad is what Alabama and Sarkisian and all those guys, probably what Kiffin calls it, because he probably got the name railroad when those two were either, whether it was when Kiffin was at Alabama or when they were together before. I mean, you know, Sark was running this when he was with the Falcons. Okay. Typically this guy is going to be over here, and you're building that same mesh concept that we talked about earlier, where you're doing something here, but instead of putting him on a corner route, they take him now and put him here. And instead of putting the rail tailback in the flat, and that's why they call it railroad, is they rail the running back. It's not a wheel route where he starts like out wide, like he's going here, and then turns it up. It is truly a go right now, get as wide and as vertical as you can and get your head around in a hurry. Okay. They've run this the past few years at Alabama. I bet Sark called it 7 or 8 times a game. And there's a lot of programs around the country that, whether they were already doing it or they're doing it now, it's really become a staple of kind of what they do. So they got down in the red zone against Oklahoma here. And this was the first, or I think it was the second touchdown for them. And what they did was they showed jet motion here. So they brought him in jet sweep. Well, going back to our Louisville conversation, right? You're telling all these dudes now, we got to communicate. We got to recognize that they've just flipped the passing strength, right? All these different things have changed. Well, they brought the motion. The quarterback gave a quick fake here, and now they built that railroad concept behind it. So he's going here, typically at about 10 yards. He's going to go here, and he cannot stop. If he feels it's man-to-man, he's going to keep running all the way to the Gatorade. Okay? If it's not man-to-man, he's going to settle down, but he's not going to do it until he gets to that opposite guard or typically tackle. This guy's going to come underneath him. And again, if it's man-to-man, he's going to go all the way to the cheerleaders, right?
Because you're wanting to clear people out in that case.
Exactly.
Okay.
If he finds zone, he's going to settle over the tackle. So what I've done now is I've created this triangle right here, where if those backers split to take the routes and pass them off, I've got a guy right behind him, in theory, sitting in that window, right? What they've done now is they've taken this tailback and they've put him here. So again, you've created a little bit of another triangle. And so what they do is, this is going to be their first read, is going to be this tailback. If this corner steps inside and takes that over the ball route, the OTB, that second receiver's running, so because let
me ask you a question, Pete. I'm curious. And when the Z went in motion, the corner shifted, the strong safety shifted, they moved over, right?
That's exactly what happened. So it's part of playing with the eyes, right? Whether they're playing man-to-man or zone, if they're playing man-to-man, he's mine. I got to take him, right? Well, if I'm playing zone, there's a good chance that my eyes are here.
So if he's in man, the quarterback knows it because he goes with him across the field?
Exactly. He's going to run with him, right?
Okay, I got you.
Well, and here's the thing. He doesn't have to run with him. When he moves, he can bump in here to now take him, but now what does it do? It causes all these guys to shift as well.
The quarterback then sees a domino, and now he knows they're in man.
Right. Even if they don't give you the full domino effect, if they're playing zone, his eyes are likely right here. And what his reaction is going to be based off the release of number 2. If number 2 goes inside or vertical, this guy is now going to think number 1 is mine unless he disappears underneath. Then he's somebody else's. So either way, when he goes in motion, this guy has to move, because if they're playing zone, well, number 2 is not the H anymore. It's now the Y. So now I have to adjust and, again, get my eyes to my number 2, right? Well, number 2 goes inside. Now I've got all of 1. Well, where's 1 going? He's going inside. So I've now just vacated space for him, right? The other thing to recognize is, let's say it is man-to-man. You just made somebody's change responsibility. So kids are having to talk in a hurry. Well, look at the route structure. He's going right at these backers to go here. He's going right through those backers to go here. It is highly likely that this guy is who's responsible for the tailback and protection, or in man-to-man coverage.
And he's got all sorts of traffic now.
All sorts of traffic, right? It's also easy because if he goes to release and this guy goes with him,
he can't run with him.
Read. If he can run with him, at least as a quarterback, it's very easy for me to identify it, right? But that also means that I'm not hot off that side. I don't have to worry about pressure. So you build those stressors like that. So that's what happened was they brought this guy in jet motion, released the tailback, and you're not trying to throw a 40-yard pass. You go watch. Najee Harris was the most complete player in college football last year, and probably the most complete player in the last 10 years of college football. I completely in the fan club. Okay. He caught this ball more often than not less than 7 yards from the line of scrimmage.
Oh,
And a
wow.
lot of times it was a back shoulder throw where he'd be here and they would throw it here because somebody's trying to get out to him, and they would back shoulder where he could turn away from the defender, and sometimes good enough to break the tackle anyway, you know? So that's what happened last week was they hit the tailback here for an easy trot into the end zone. And if somebody else is on the tailback, then you've got this guy coming back underneath, who is your second read, or you can come all the way back here. Some guys will teach this to go from the railroad to the OTB and then find him late. Guys, like I said, different guys have different ways for teaching things, and it has to do with different timing and routes and spacing and who you have running it and all that kind of stuff. But those are, that's 3 different ways I've shown you where they try to get into this mesh concept, and they really like it on short yardage situations. Ole Miss ran it 2 or 3 times last week on 3rd and 4th down. It's a concept that everybody has something in. Everybody's got a version of it, right? But clearly you're not going to have the whole college football world trying to play that unless it's effective. And then kind of, one of the, I think maybe, last one that I'm going to show you, if I can get back to it, is, they'll play with 2 tight ends on the field, and teams have talked about how is Ole Miss going to hold up with 6 DBs on the field when you start getting multiple players and tight ends and teams that really want to get downhill on you. And so they'll give you some of this at Tulane. And I'm not telling you that it's going to look the same as when Alabama does it, but they'll give it to you. They'll put a tight end and a wing together. They'll put 2 tight ends, a tight end on either side with 2 receivers. They'll get into some 2 tight stuff. And I fully expect, if I'm Tulane, I'm doing it early against Ole Miss to find out what the reaction is. I'm going to put 2 tight ends on the field, whether it's tight end wing or balanced, and I'm going to make you decide, are you changing personnel? How are you going to leverage the box? What are you going to do in your new defensive structure to account for my 2 tight ends?
Because if you stay in that with the 6 DBs, basically, we're going to run at you all day.
That's what you hope is an offense, for sure. Right. So I think
it's interesting, right? Because you've got these 2 games. I know all the focus is on Tulane, and it has to be. But the next couple of teams, Alabama, Arkansas, they'd love to run it at you. I mean,
amen.
Yeah,
if you watch Arkansas run the ball the other night, they're doing a good job of it right now.
I have to be honest with you. It's one of the games I'm already, as I was watching Arkansas against Texas the other day, I was like, oh, I can't wait to do that with Pete. If this thing goes like scratch where Ole Miss gets by Tulane, doesn't get by Alabama, that Arkansas game gets really interesting because Arkansas is it's going to be a chess match. And we're way ahead, but they're going to try to go, hey, look, you leave 6 on and we're going to eat clock and run all night long. And it's going to make DJ Durkin make a really interesting decision, probably, like you said, Pete, early in the game.
It is. It'll be interesting to see that chess match. And, I listen, everybody's got the teams they love to hate and the teams they truly hate. And for me, it's Arkansas. I was on the sidelines for the 7 overtime game. The next year when we go to Fayetteville and it's a complete debacle. The time after that, we go to Fayetteville, it's a debacle. The 4th and 25, it was after my father's funeral. Like, oh, God. Literally, not an Arkansas fan, but I am a Sam Pittman fan. I've been in the room with the guy. And I'm a fan, and I think he's a good ball coach. And I don't know what's going to happen at Arkansas. And if last weekend was an indication of who they're going to be, but you're right, that chess match and those decisions between Alabama and Arkansas, and that's going to start this week because Ole Miss is going to find out what can we get away with to some degree. Right.
This is a good game to play right now, right? I mean,
it is a scary game to play and a great game to play for a lot of different reasons. It's going to give you answers about where you really are in some cases defensively, I think. It's also they're good enough on defense, that it's going to be a better test than last week. Can the offensive line improve? Right. So I think in a lot of ways, there's definitely a good, but at the same time, cautious, place for this to be in the schedule.
So if you're Willie Fritz and you're Chip Long and you're pressing the issue early in the game, right? With a lineup like this,
I'm pressing the issue early. I'm lining up like this. And, they, like I said, they did it against, Oklahoma. And one of the first things, that same spacing concept I showed you earlier, everybody thinks here's the big boys they're about to try to run the ball. Well, they came out and they ran that same spacing concept. He went here. He went here. He's in the flat, right? So again, we've created now these extra gaps that you have to account for in the run game, but you also better be prepared for the different stretches we're going to give you in the passing game. So they'll pack it in because this is another type of a compressed set. Yeah, only one side's compressed, right? But again, it creates the same thing that the first formation I showed you. It created extra run gaps, but it still gives you the ability to do different things in the passing game and stretch some things. They'll also do some things, and this is something that, their offense coordinator's probably been doing since he was at Notre Dame is, they'll bring this guy in motion for jet sweep, and then what they'll do is they will actually run zone this way with the offensive line and try to get all these eyes seeing zone. And then they will put these guys here out in front to block for the jet sweep. Now, there's a couple ways to do it. You can call the jet sweep, and now that gives you the advantage of a third hat. Then you talk about a potential mathematical advantage. It's a problem. With an athletic quarterback, it's not out of the question that you tell him, hey, if you don't like the numbers and the leverage over here, you keep it and become our tailback. It can happen, right? But the other thing that a lot of teams will do is they'll run the same play with the tailback now being here. And this is a pre-snap read for the quarterback. If the defense has the advantage, hand it to the tailback. If the defense does not have the advantage, like here where it's 2/2, you give it to the jet sweep and the tailback becomes a decoy. And you're dividing, you're giving a split flow to the defense, as it's called, and you're dividing their eyes. And you're creating places where a ball carrier can potentially stick his foot in the ground or outrun you to the sidelines and turn it into a solid chunk play. So there's a lot of things that they can and will do with these little compressed sets and with their motion. And I'm very curious. In some ways, playing with these guys being aggressive, safety type bodies is an advantage because of the speed that you have on the field. And they've shown with those guys, they have shown that they are willing to come up and set an edge and be involved and be physical. I mean, you watch the first half of that Louisville game, and dear God, even with 87 players getting ejected, they're still flying around and selling out, right?
Yeah, Otis Reese, Tyler Knight,
yeah,
Kedron Smith. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that are physical players that kind of, I think, thrive in the box. Even they look like small guys, but I mean,
but they want to play in the box. I mean, look, that's why Mike Hilton's getting paid what he's getting paid right now in the NFL.
Yeah,
because he's a kid that he's comfortable in the slot and coverage, but he thrives being in there because whether it's as a blitzer, as a run fitter, or as a cover guy, right? And in a lot of ways, I think Tyler Knight's a little bit of a poor man's Mike Hilton. I don't know if he's got the same ceiling Mike has, because the thing I always heard about Mike when he was at Ole Miss was how smart he was.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard some of the same with Tylen, and I know Tylen's old high school coach, and he's told me lots of wonderful things about the kid. But I'm curious to see, we know what these guys can do from a speed perspective and the games and the advantages they can potentially give Ole Miss and all this stuff. The question is, how are they here? How are they really at the point of attack when it's bigger bodies consistently over the course of a game? And that, to me, is going to come down to, what does Ole Miss really have to commit to the pressure? And what can Ole Miss, what can they do on the edge to be strong on that perimeter and to hold up? And that's going to be the make or break in my mind for the Ole Miss defense.
In the end, what do you expect? You pretty much nailed it last week with exactly what would happen. You've pretty much nailed it 2 weeks in a row. Kind of, when you look into your crystal ball, how do you see this thing playing out?
I would not be shocked to see Tulane have success early. I would not be shocked to see it take Ole Miss a minute to get into a rhythm offensively. The flip side of that is, I don't know how many teams are out there that Ole Miss does not have the potential to absolutely blow the lid off of it early. If they can control the line of scrimmage at all offensively, They need somebody else to develop on the perimeter, but from a play design and just the bodies they have to put in the kid they have putting it in places.
He's playing so well.
That's the key, man. And so look, if you told me this thing's close and then suddenly it opens up and Ole Miss wins, I'd go, yeah, I believe it.
Sure.
And if you told me that Ole Miss is going to blow the top off it early and then Tulane's going to come back and make it a game and then Ole Miss is going to find a way to seal it, I believe it. If you told me that Ole Miss absolutely showed their youth, and the game was not the game you wanted to see, I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked. Ultimately, I don't know if Ole Miss is the 17th best team in the country, but I think on any given day, with the chip that on their shoulder that they seem to be playing with defensively, and with the guys they have offensively, they are capable of playing like the 17th best team in the country any Saturday.
We won't do this next week because Ole Miss has an open date. I'm just get your quick thoughts. I mean, real quick, like a minute or less on these teams. What are your thoughts on Mississippi State so far?
Mississippi State's good on defense. They're going to do a good job on defense. They have talent on defense. Offensively, they haven't found their identity yet, and I can't figure out what it is. I'm from Philadelphia, Mississippi, and I can tell you I would not kick it deep to Tulu because when he was at Philadelphia High School, he was doing the same thing he's doing now at Mississippi State. So I don't kick it deep to Tulu. Other than that, if they find an identity on offense, they're going to be a more than competent football team because of their defense.
We did this thing all preseason with Texas A&M, national title contender, blah, blah, blah. They don't look like it through 2 games. Now the quarterback's out. They're very good on defense. There's no question about that, but I don't know that there's enough.
I've never been a Jimbo fan. I've never been a Jimbo fan. Not that he's not a good football coach. And there's a lot of people that'll tell you sit in a room and talk passing game with Jimbo and the things that he'll teach you. They say he's phenomenal. And I don't doubt that at all. For whatever reason, I don't think it translates. I haven't watched them a ton. I think they're a team that's going to have to rely on the run game to win and be smart and selective in the passing game. And so the question is, how good can they be running the football and play action in people?
You mentioned Arkansas earlier. They have an identity. There's no question about that. You know what they are, how they want to play. What about LSU right now? Are people writing them off too quickly, or is this indeed a train wreck? It looks like a train wreck.
It does look like a train wreck, and they were going to have lumps offensively this year. It's going to happen. 2 years ago, they lost a ton of talent. They lost more talent last year. The quarterback room has been up and down, and, different things have happened. And so, from an identity standpoint, I don't think they know who they are. I think ultimately the biggest issue is when Orgeron had to replace Dave Aranda, he went for what he was comfortable with and not what fit his roster and maybe the modern climate of the SEC. And it showed. It showed early in the season, and it stayed, right? And so they've made some changes and they've done some things, but I don't know if it's almost hard to tell how bought in Orgeron really is on what they're trying to do. And they've got some elite players on defense, and if they get them all playing in the same place, but when Chip Kelly's in his bag, what he does designing the run game, that's the thing. Joe Moorhead and Chip Kelly probably don't get enough credit for what they do and how they choose to attack people in the run game. And for a long time, Chip Kelly just hadn't necessarily had the ways to do it. And I think when people think of him, especially in the NFL, and people look at some of the passing and the option stuff, but man, he finds some crazy wrinkles to attack you. And he damn found them against LSU, but he had a long time to prepare too. So as the season goes on, I'm curious to see what LSU looks like when they get more settled.
It's great stuff. There's a couple of games next week that I've been talking about all week. I'm really interested in LSU at Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and Arkansas and Arlington. I think both of those games could go completely different than the way that we all thought they would go throughout the preseason. And if I'm right, man, the storylines heading into that next week are just crazy because the league gets weird quick.
It does. It gets weird in a hurry. I think if Arkansas upsets A&M, I think that's when people really go, hold up. regardless of who wins between Mississippi State and LSU, I don't think suddenly one of them has arrived. I still think both of them are in a process of getting better. The A&M Arkansas game is going to be the more of the statement one to me, right?
Yeah, because it would be a real statement about A&M that, hey, this just isn't working. I mean,
exactly.
you're close, but in
Yep.
this league where Alabama's in the league, close doesn't cut it.
Nope.
And it creates this giant opening for Ole Miss at that point.
Yes.
To skyrocket. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, if you're watching that game, you kind of want to see, as much as you don't want Arkansas to get rolling from an Ole Miss perspective, you'd love to see Arkansas knock them out because it creates this. You talked about the highway a minute ago.
Yep.
It creates an interstate. Well, hey, thanks for the time. Good luck with your team this weekend, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks to get ready for Ole Miss and Alabama. That'll be pretty interesting to see your take on the Tide, because they look like the best team in the country.
They're really good, and I'm curious to look at them, talk closely too, and see how they look. Sark gone and Bill O'Brien in, and what stayed in the offense, what's gone, and some of the things just in the one game I watched, there's elements that he certainly brought back with him from his time in the NFL. And he's obviously doing it with those Bama kids. So I'm excited to talk about that one. In the meantime, thanks again for having me. And looking forward to a good slate of games this weekend.
All right, Pete, take care. Have a great weekend.
Same to you.
That was Pete DeWeese. Always appreciate his time each week here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Again, it's Ole Miss Tulane, Saturday night at 7. Earlier today, I spoke with Tulane wide receivers coach Jeff Conway. He joined me from Birmingham, where the Green Wave are still based, at least through Sunday. So here's Tulane wide receivers coach Jeff Conway. Tulane wide receivers coach Jeff Conway, kind enough to spend some time with me today. I was just telling Jeff before we got started, his daughter Bobby and my daughter Campbell are sorority sisters, great friends, gotten to know each other. I'll tell you this, Jeff, we moved into Reed Hall again in August, moving Caroline, and Bobby was right there waiting for us at the car to help us move our stuff. It was
right.
It was, thank goodness, because she was a huge help. She's a great young woman who've really gotten to enjoy getting to know her, and so glad that she's part of Campbell's life. So
well, thank you.
Good to talk to you. All right. I know obviously there's football, and we'll talk about the football in a minute, but in many ways, when I think about what you guys have been through, the football's somewhat secondary. You're obviously Tulane's there in New Orleans, and the hurricane's coming, and someone who lived in Mobile, I know what that's like. Hey, there's a hurricane on the way. You've got to watch it. And you begin to realize that this thing's probably going to impact New Orleans and South Louisiana in a big way. And you guys get out of there to go to Birmingham. I know you're coaching a football team, but you also have a family and a house, and you've got all this stuff going on. What was that like those 3 days before the hurricane hit New Orleans?
Well, hurricanes are a fairly common occurrence in that area of the United States. So I remember we've been at, my family and I have been in New Orleans with Tulane now for 6 years. And I remember when Ida was forming, people said could be big. We've been in that situation multiple times, and we seem to have avoided most of the serious damage. Obviously Lake Charles and Baton Rouge have gotten hit a lot harder in the last 2 years than New Orleans. But anyway, as this thing got closer, when you're involved in a football season, it comes in 10-minute increments, 10 minutes to the next meeting, 10-minute film review. And so you kind of get lost a little bit on what's going on. Our director of football operations, Shane Meyer, does a great job of updating us and on what's going on, particularly weather-wise. So we scrimmaged the week before we played our first game of the year against Oklahoma. We scrimmaged that Saturday morning, and Coach Fritz kind of had an unannounced team meeting right afterwards. And it was then that we had speculated before this might happen, but didn't think it was going to. Coach Fritz announced that we would be leaving, and relocating in Birmingham, Alabama, and the entire team would be going. And obviously there was some concern by a lot of kids in that direction. You mean, what do you mean I'm leaving? What about my pets? What about my place? Because you have people that are on campus and you have people that are off campus. It's two different dynamics. And then to think we're going to move our entire football operation up, roughly 6 hours away is a little bit of a daunting task. But we were meeting on that in that team meeting around 11 in the morning. And we announced that we were leaving at 7 o'clock that night.
Unbelievable.
And our administration and director of football operations did an unbelievable job because, after you get over the small things, like, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to how many days of clothes do I bring? And things like that. The fact that the university decided to take the entire football program, really all athletics, it ended up eventually being all athletics, to Birmingham, Alabama, to be safe from the hurricane threat, 140 mile an hour winds, is really a blessing. And that's what we tried to preach to the players in times of concern. I remember our first night here, we got in at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and that Saturday. And the next day, we didn't practice, but we have one of our duties is bed check. And I have, coaching the wide receivers for Tulane, I have 13 different rooms that I have to check. And when we had a staff meeting that afternoon, Coach said, make sure you take the time to sit and visit with each kid about things that he's concerned about ease his fears and really talk to him. And it was great advice. It was great advice on his part because that, which normally takes about 15 minutes to bed check 13 rooms, that took an hour and a half because lots of kids were concerned, but they're tough guys and they don't want to let you know that they're concerned, but there was concern. And you got to remember too, a large part of these kids have people, some friends or family or somebody connected to New Orleans. Most of them left, but some of them stayed. And obviously they were very concerned about those people as well. So at the end, the biggest takeaway is that Tulane kept us safe and made the decision to take us away. And this goes annually. It goes back. The preparation for this is quite extensive. Our, as I mentioned before, our director of football operations, he makes an annual trip to Birmingham to make sure we have the right hotel and to make sure they have the right services, because sometimes their labor force changes and ours hasn't. So he's got to get those people up to date. And here we are. We ended up happening this year. So it was in the hotel and the city of Birmingham. There's so many people. Mountain Brook High School here in Birmingham. There's so many people that have gone out of their way to not only make us feel welcome, but accommodate us, because as you can imagine, with roughly 200 people involved in a move, it takes a lot of organization.
So what is just a typical practice day like there in Birmingham? I know you guys have been, the game that was scheduled for New Orleans got moved to Norman. We'll talk about that in a minute. You played a home game, in quotes, at Legion Field. You've been getting ready this week to go to Ole Miss. I know you guys have practiced. I saw you practice one day in Tuscaloosa. You've practiced in some different places. It sounds like most of it's at Mountain Brook, but what's a typical day like?
Well, we actually, Neal, when on Sunday, which was our first full day here, 6 days before the Oklahoma game, we were calling around trying to find a place to practice and trying to find a place to lift weights, because it's not like you can go to the hotel weight room and accommodate an entire football team. Yeah. Mountain Brook High School actually was the facility that allowed us to use their weight room. And they were great about it. And on top of that, they gave a bunch of donations. Like by day 2, we had boxes and boxes of toilet paper and deodorant and things just sitting that had been donated so the kids could walk down and grab it and come back. We ended up getting Legion Field here in Birmingham to practice at. It's a short drive, so we run in, we dress here, we run into the locker room to dump our stuff, and we run out of the field and we practice for 2 hours. 2 times because of rain threats. The University of Alabama has been very gracious to allow us to use their indoor facility. Once the first week in preparation for Oklahoma, and then yesterday in preparation for Ole Miss. So, I mean, we couldn't have practiced like the Monday, Labor Day. We couldn't find a place to practice because it was still good weather, and it was, things were shut down because of Labor Day, and we were able to. It ended up being a day off for us, which the players were excited about. But other than that, we had there was a lot that went into it. But a typical day is, I guess we're up by 5:30 or 6, and we meet as a coaching staff offensively. And then we start breakfast at 6:30, and then the kids got to get taped, and we've got a kind of a mobile training room set up in one of the ballrooms downstairs, and the kids can get taping and treatment done there. And then we start special teams meetings, and then we go right into position meetings, and then we get on the bus, and 4 buses take us to Legion Field and we practice. And we come back and we shower up and go back down as a coaching staff. And we spend the rest of the day together, game planning or watching film or, prepping for our upcoming game. And then that kind of finishes with bed check, and they've been giving us per diem, so you got to find a place to eat, and they're providing breakfast for us here at the hotel, so that's been convenient. The first 2 weeks, we've been here 3 weeks, Neal, and the first 2 weeks were very crazy. It was like being a pro football player. The kids didn't have any class. The university had delayed online classes until this week. Well, it was back to reality this week because now classes have been going on now for 4 days. And that there was a little grumbling about that, about having to take classes, but we tried to assure them that their pro football time would come. It's not here yet. And so the kids have been involved in classes, that literally last all afternoon. We have lots of kids we had 30 kids the other night who couldn't go to a dinner that was provided to us by one of our boosters because they had night class. So it's just, all these, and getting the kids to have access to their laptops and find a quiet area. And so that's kind of a typical day. And then, but it's just another day. It's not, we're safe, we're healthy, and that means a lot.
Your house came out okay down in New Orleans?
Yeah, we got lucky. We live in an area that is not flooded. And so we got 2 trees that went down in our driveway, and my wife had driven the car up here, and had my car been sitting there, it would have gotten hit. But luckily, all it did was trap her car in the driveway. Other than that, we had quite a bit of debris that blew in through the windows, kind of around the window frames. And then the electricity went off for, 8-10 days. And we learned a valuable lesson not to leave your food in there and hope that you get back in a couple days. So my wife has gone back once to try to take care of that kind of stuff. But
you've not been back at all, right?
No, there's just, this is an everyday,
right.
We're here. And we knew this when we took this job, that when you go through human resources, your orientation, you're told that if your athletic team is relocated, you as a coach must go with them. And we wanted to.
Of course.
My 3 kids are lucky enough to all either be in school in Fayetteville, Arkansas, or working. And so all we really had to worry about was Jolene and I, my wife. And so, most of our focus has been the kids.
What have you learned about the kids that you coach? I know you recruited those guys, you like those guys, but obviously this is not what they were planning for all summer when they're lifting weights, running, and all that stuff. They're not thinking, hey, we're going to be in a hotel in Birmingham, Alabama for 3.5 weeks. And this game that we've got this big hyped up game with Oklahoma that we're going to play on our campus. It's actually going to be in Norman, and our home game against was it Morgan State?
Morgan State.
That was not going to be in New Orleans either. We're going to play that in front of 2,200 people in Birmingham. And, I mean, to say they've dealt with some adversity here is an understatement. What have you learned from them about?
The kids here's what I've learned. The kids are really more resilient than the adults. They bounce back and they're just happy to hang out with their friends, and play football, and have a good meal and have some fun. And there's been very little drama. There really has. And another thing that has been brought out in this scenario is that we have really good kids in our program. That's hard to do a lot of times when you have 120 players, but Tulane recruits a certain type of individual that's academically oriented to begin with. So those kids tend to be goal oriented and fewer problems in general. And we've got really good kids. Now the freshmen, well, by the way, we're in a COVID pandemic too. So we have our kids who we signed in this class. We've never met them before. Most of them. That's not 100% true, but and you really get to know those kids, and that's been a blessing. The other byproduct of this whole thing, Neal, is that our kids, and our kids talked about this a lot, is the closeness, the brotherhood that would be formed. And believe me, when we played, let me take it a step farther. When we recovered the onside against Oklahoma with 2 minutes left to go in the game, there was about 75 guys on our sideline that were 100% convinced we were going to win the game. There was no wavering. No one was second guessing. It was on. And what a cool feeling that is. And so this team is probably as closer than any other team I've been around here at Tulane. And a lot of it's because of what we're going through.
You play Ole Miss on Saturday night here in Oxford. What have your impressions been of Ole Miss? There was a team that defensively last year was just awful. They look like they're significantly better so far this year, but you're a football guy. You've looked at them on film. What do you see from Ole Miss's defense in terms of the challenges they present you guys?
Oh, I think, Neal, it's a lot like playing Oklahoma. They have good football players, and they're a upper echelon program, and they have a dynamic offense and quarterback. And so, we got our work cut out for us. And, but I've been very impressed with their improvement on defense. They got some transfers that are good players. And then some of the kids that were playing last year have grown up. They've been through the tough times, I think. And they're playing with a lot of energy right now. And so it'll be a tough task. I mean, going into Oxford in of itself. But I like our chances. Our kids are tough. The Oklahoma game, if it did anything, Neal, it convinced our team that we could compete. Unfortunately, it probably woke up Ole Miss. No, I'm just kidding.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I think those kids see that score and they go, "Whoa!" Because if you believe the preseason hype on Oklahoma, they're a top 5 team, a national title contender, and they've built this lead on you guys, and probably a lot of people checked out of that game, and you looked up and it's like, whoa, it's a 5-point game, and Tulane's got the football here at the end. I mean, that ought to turn some heads.
I think that tribute to our program and Coach Fritz and our kids is that I think that a lot of times the prediction will be that a bigger school and major program like that has an upper hand, but it's also a tall task, because one thing that we are is we're a tough football team. We have tough kids, and they battle. Kids from that area of the United States, they don't back down from anybody or anything. And so as coaches, we're excited about we love playing these games because we can help hold our head high when we walk into the stadium, know that it's going to be a dogfight that day, and the best team has a chance to win. And the other thing, I think the other dynamic that's involved is the kids. A lot of times as a football program, you connect yourself to something outside of football, and you end up fighting for that. Well, our choice has been easy this fall because our choice is the city of New Orleans and the people who really have it a lot worse than we do as a football program. Here, the hurricane's gone through, and some people have lost everything. We're going to go back Sunday and get ready for a game against UAB at home. And we've got football and we've got places to live, and we've got people who'll take care of us. And there are people in New Orleans who are suffering great hardships right now. And for us to be able to play for them on their behalf is an honor. And our kids have attached themselves to that. They talked about it a lot before Oklahoma, and danged if they didn't talk about it last week against our at home game, if you will, here in Birmingham against Morgan State. And they've attached themselves to that. I think that's been a real positive.
What was the reaction this week when Coach Fritz told the guys, hey, we're about to head back? And
as I told you earlier, I guess it was just another team meeting, and we were making announcements. But when in our kid, it's a pretty there's one person talking in those meetings, and that's the head coach. Yeah. But danged if he didn't say, guys, all right, we're going to go play Ole Miss, and we're going to bus over there. It's about 2.5, 3 hours. We're going to bus back that night after the game. We're going to get up early and drive back to New Orleans. And the kids started clapping and hooping and hollering. They're excited. And you forget that sometimes as a football coach that they're trying to battle their way through every single day and every single hour. And you sometimes forget about the pressure that they're involved with also. And so that was fun to see. And, and then right away we went to work, getting ready.
Hey, last thing, you mentioned pets and stuff. Are some of those pets with you guys there at the hotel?
Yes. Thank goodness this is a pet-friendly hotel, because I had no idea about 30 of our guys have dogs. And we have some auxiliary vans that came up with us, and all the dogs came in the vans. And you got to make arrangements for them. And the hotel staff said, ask our players to quit walking them around the hotel. Please take them outside. And, it's been, but they've been very accommodating. This is a skeleton staff that the Sheraton's been working with.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah,
the pandemic has made a lot of hotels.
No doubt. And
bare bones.
I heard today they have 31 employees.
Wow.
Trying to take care of. And so, you're not getting your room cleaned every day and normal stuff in a hotel, but again, we're safe and we're healthy and we're getting to coach and play football. So it's still good.
Really appreciate the time. I know you're on a busy schedule. Thanks for spending some time with us. Safe travels over to Oxford on Saturday. Best of luck to you and your team, and look forward to meeting you sometime soon.
That'd be great, Neal. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jeff. That was Tulane's Jeff Conway. Again, Ole Miss, Tulane, Saturday night. And the Green Wave get to go head home on Sunday, which has to be great news for those guys after almost a month of having their lives turned upside down. Thoughts and all of that with the people in South Louisiana and a lot of those places still continuing to rebuild after Hurricane Ida. So we'll switch gears now. Let's talk some more SEC in general, a little bit more on Ole Miss, Tulane, but SEC in general and some national football stuff. Also thoughts on what Ole Miss looks like, the way the SEC West pecking order might have changed since the preseason. All of that with Ryan Brown of The Next Round, who I talked to earlier this week. Here's Ryan. Ryan Brown, Next Round Live, joins us here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Ryan, how are you?
Neal, I am doing awesome. You doing all right?
Yeah, man, it's been a good week. It's
good.
coming to an end. Got another weekend of football in front of us. We'll get to Ole Miss and Tulane in a minute. I did want to get your thoughts. We're 2 weeks into the season, and we have the coaching carousel turning. The carnage has begun. Clay Helton out at USC after 2 games.
Yeah.
Did that
Will you follow Lane there? Do you stay in Oxford, or when Lane takes the USC job, do you go to LA? How does that work?
I think the way it works is that assuming he goes next week, because it's an open date,
that's right.
I'll go finish the season with him. And then
that makes sense. Yeah.
And then we'll figure out what we do after that, because it's a lot of moving parts at that point.
There's no doubt. There are plenty of moving parts.
I mean,
I liken this to when Les Miles got fired at LSU after the loss at Auburn. I don't think LSU fired Les Miles then because they feared Les Miles was going to go 5-7 or 6-6. They feared Les Miles was going to go 8-4 or 9-3.
Yeah.
And that they were going to get to the end of the year and they were going to have that same situation that they had always had with Les Miles, is he hasn't really done enough to get fired, but we're really tired of him and we'd like to move on, but this is going to be hard to justify. And now you get, with Clay Helton, I think it was the same thing. I think they looked at the season and they're like, this guy's going to go probably 9-3, and we're going to be right in this situation at the end of the year. So people are upset. Let's fire him now. Let's fire him while everybody's mad and there's a groundswell of furor, and we'll cash this season out.
And you're exactly right, by the way. You're 100% right. But here's the mistake they're making. Back then, yeah, you could tamper with players, but they couldn't transfer. Now, guys can bolt. And so what you sent the message 2 weeks in is, our roster's wide open, fellas. Our roster's wide open. Send in everybody call the high school coaches, everybody call the uncles and the aunts, and let the kids know that, hey, school X is really interested in you, since the program you're at is a complete disaster. You have a one-time no penalty transfer. Understand this. We've got a spot for you in January. And now the NCAA is going to pass this rule that lets you take on 7 more guys, at least for this year. And who knows what it looks like going forward. Hey, we got a spot. Got a linebacker spot, got a cornerback spot, got a running back spot. Come on. And by the time whoever gets that job, assuming in December, they better hire that. Whoever gets it, they better hire him quick, because by December the 20th, he's going to run out of time to recruit his own guys.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is going to be hard on whoever takes that job, because they're going to have to start telling that roster, hey, no. Your next coach is Mario Cristobal or James Franklin or fill in the blame, Matt Campbell, whoever it is. That's who we've got now. Stick with us. You're going to love playing for Coach Cristobal.
You didn't mention Kiffin.
You mean the guy they fired on the tarmac? That guy?
I know.
I love Lane. You know what? You know how much I love Lane. I picked him to go 10-2 this year, but they're not going to hire him. But you see what I'm saying is they're going to have to tell these players, this is our next guy, man. Just stick with us. You're going to love Mario. And that's why Mario Cristobal is already getting asked about it, and he's handling it horribly. That's why James Franklin, with a huge game against Auburn this Saturday, he's handling it horribly, because these guys either want the job or they want to keep it alive to get a contract extension. And this is going to be messy because of everything we've just mentioned. This is going to be messy for them for, 2 or 3 months. They're going to get tired. Mario's going to snap at somebody. Franklin's going to snap at somebody. But these guys could easily end this by saying, and I know Nick Saban did this once and took the Alabama job at the same time, but, I am not going there. You don't have to ask me again. The answer is an absolute no. But they don't want to do that because they either want the job or they want to get the contract extension out of this opening.
Which job will be better in late November, early December, USC or LSU?
I mean, I think LSU is the better of the 2 jobs. Now, the thing you don't know about LSU is NCAA situations. A lot of that stuff is still out there. I don't even know what the NCAA is doing right now. Are they actively investigating anybody? I think they got college basketball coaches on tape, speaking of LSU, saying, that they're making offers. I don't even know if they're investigating those coaches. So I don't know that the NCAA is investigating anyone. So that may not even be a consideration for any coach right now. But if you took that off the table, if you told me, hey, any of this stuff that's bubbling with LSU, it's not going to lead to any sort of NCAA investigation. To me, LSU is the better job. You've got facilities updated. You're in the Southeastern Conference. Recruiting is never an issue at LSU. It shouldn't be at USC, but it has become one. It's got everything you want. So I would take LSU over USC.
All right, let's jump into the games, because there's
a
handful of really good games. one that people are trying to make into a big game, and I can't get there because I failed to see how it's going to be competitive. But it's in your state. You tell me. Florida and Alabama meet in Gainesville. Alabama's a 2-touchdown favorite. Alabama, I know they slept walk against Mercer. I couldn't care less. I know what they did against Miami. What do you make of the Tide and the Gators?
I think because of that sleepwalking. So here's, for those who didn't follow it, here's the progression. Now, this Nick Saban normally does this at the end of the year because the FCS opponent is normally at the end of the year. But this year, with the new SEC schedules, the FCS opponent has moved up to the start of the schedule. So you had Nick Saban doing the old, we practice horribly, don't respect the opponent, all the external factors are bothering us. You had that annual Nick Saban FCS rant. He does it every single year Alabama's playing an FCS opponent. And normally the media helps him, Neal, by saying, Coach, do you anticipate getting all 4 quarterbacks in the game? And Nick Saban blows up at that. Well, why would you assume we could play any quarter? He loves that, right? And so Nick Saban blows up. And sure enough, he's right. Alabama comes out and plays like crap for the first half against Mercer. It's against Mercer, though, so it doesn't matter. And that is what Nick Saban wanted to happen. He would never tell you that, but that's what he wanted to happen because he preached how crappy they practice. They played crappy, and they did it against an opponent that it won't cost them against because it's Mercer. So here's what's happened now, and Nick Saban's already said this. They've had a great week of practice. They are crisp. They realize, hey, guys, if we weren't playing Mercer last week, we might have been within 2 scores of somebody, right? So of course, they've had a great week of practice this week, and I think they are going to have a tremendous game against Florida. I think it'll be a clean performance. I don't think Richardson or Emory Jones are ready. They're about to go from basic math to calculus against Alabama's defense. They played Florida Atlantic and South Florida. You've seen nothing like what Nick Saban throws at you. Bryce Young, he's not had a road start yet, but the guy he's cool as he can be. It's not like it's something that would fluster him. I think this will be a near perfect Alabama performance. I think they'll win this thing going away.
Yeah, I do too. It's always fun to watch the Saban psychology because he's got a routine and he just does the same thing and everyone kind of falls for it every single year.
Every time, yeah.
I used to think the question got planted. Like, hey, I need to make sure this question gets asked. I'm going to yell at you, but it's not personal. Just do me a favor. In fact, you can't really completely convince me that doesn't happen. All right, Auburn goes to Penn State. Auburn's played nobody, but they've looked damn good doing it, at least for the most part, and it has a slow start or whatever. But, again, you're playing nobody. It's hard to get super excited to play nobody. Penn State went to Wisconsin and won. James Franklin's got all the USC rumors and stuff flying around. What do you anticipate happening in Happy Valley?
This is a tough one for me to try to predict what's happening just because you mentioned it. Auburn looked really good against Akron. They were sharp, almost no issues against Akron. Early against Alabama State was a different story. They struggled a little bit to get the ball in the end zone. They were sloppy. It just wasn't a good performance. It was like what Alabama did against Mercer. It's one of those games where you can try all you want to get 18, 19, 20-year-olds to believe you got to go play hard in this game. They're not going to do it. So that, Auburn kind of regressed just a little bit there. They took care of business in the second half. This is what this game comes down to for me. I think you look at the knowns for team. We've seen Penn State tested. What we know is against a quality defense at Wisconsin, they struggled to run the football effectively. Sean Clifford struggled to throw the ball consistently. Wisconsin had 3 turnovers and a chippy blocked field goal, and that's what cost them the game. Otherwise, Penn State's 1-1 right now. So, but Penn State's defense played their tails off in that game.
Yeah, they did.
So that's what I think that's the knowns for Penn State. The knowns for Auburn is they've got good running backs and they've got a solid defense. So those are things that travel well, run game and defense. The thing we don't know about the run game is can they block it? And I think, to me, that's the story of the game. If Auburn's offensive line can block the run, Auburn will be fine. Bo Nix will have time to throw. He'll have a run game to depend on. You'll play to your defense. And I think Auburn wins this game if that's the case. But that, to me, is the biggest unknown. Everybody wants to make it about Sean Clifford versus Bo Nix. And obviously, quarterbacks are very important. That's an important matchup. But to me, it's about Auburn trying to block for the run. Can they get the run game going and play to that defense, shorten the game a little bit, take the crowd out of it? To me, that's Auburn's path to victory there. And I don't know the answer to that.
I'm going to get your thoughts on a number of teams here with a kind of a big overreaching question. I'm looking ahead to next week, and I have for a little while because Ole Miss doesn't play, and I was looking into who's going to play, what games am I going to watch. And a few weeks ago, I looked at the slate, and I was like, that's going to be kind of a sleepy day of football. And now I don't think so. LSU, Mississippi State is interesting.
Yep.
Arkansas and Texas A&M at Jerry World is certainly interesting.
Very interesting.
I know that your focus is on the games we just talked about in the weekend that's coming up, and we don't know what Mississippi State will do against Memphis. We don't know what LSU will do against Central Michigan, for that matter. I think Arkansas will handle Georgia Southern with some degree of relative ease. When you look ahead now, A&M's got this quarterback problem. Arkansas hammered Texas. Mississippi State hammered NC State. Do we have the West outside of Alabama clearly being number one? Do we have the West all wrong?
Potentially. I mean, because all of a sudden Texas A&M with Haynes King out, Zach Calzada just, you looked like Jimbo was losing his patience with him. You're right. We don't know about Mississippi State, but here's what I do know. Out of 130 teams, Memphis is 127 defending the pass. So you tell me how you think that's going to go against Mississippi State. That's bad news for them. You mentioned LSU, though. This is fascinating. We were looking at this on the show today. Look at their schedule past this week. You mentioned at Mississippi State. So after they play Central Michigan, here's what they've got. At State, hosting Auburn, at Kentucky, hosting Florida, at Ole Miss, bye week, at Alabama, hosting Arkansas. There is not a breather in that whole stretch right there.
They don't have a breather again until November the 20th when they play ULM in Baton Rouge. And I got to tell you, I don't know if this thing goes the way that I think it could go, which is a lot of L's in there. I don't know that Ed Orgeron's coaching against ULM on November the 20th.
Well, I think, there are good teams. I give you 7 games there. They're pretty good teams to go 4-3 in that stretch. And I'm not sure if LSU is pretty good. Even if they're 4-3 in that stretch, they go into that ULM game with 4 losses already with Texas A&M on the horizon. But if it really gets disastrous for them in those 7 games, they go 3-4, and he's already got 5 losses. I mean, if the wheels really fall off, and there's something like 2-5, and he's got 6 losses, I'm with you. He may not be there. T-Bob Hebert was on my show, and T-Bob played there, man. He was on my show last week, and he said he thinks 8-4. It's definitely in the discussion. 7-5, 6-6, it's probably done, but 8-4 is even in the discussion for Orgeron. So, I mean, this next 7 games for them, that's must-see TV, man. Because literally, I mean, just about anything could happen. I can't see them winning at Alabama. Winning at Ole Miss is going to be tough for them. That was a classic game last year in Baton Rouge. If Arkansas is anything like they looked against Texas, are they really going to beat Arkansas? Florida, we'll find out a lot about this weekend. I've been impressed with Kentucky.
I know. I've been on the Kentucky bandwagon since the preseason. I get credit for that one. They looked the part, and that quarterback's a good player. I think
Will Levis can play. Yeah, Will Levis can play, and they've got Rodriguez is one of the best running backs. He's the leading running back in the Southeastern Conference. So, I mean, those are tough games, man. They do not have a layup until, with all due respect to the great Terry Bowden, until they get to Louisiana Monroe. Terry Bowden and Rich Rod, and who's the defensive coordinator there?
Does it matter?
No, it's something. He got 3 big names. Was it Brian Van Gorder? He's coached for everybody else.
It could be. I don't know.
But anyway, it's
probably Bill Oliver.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's fascinating, man. It is fascinating to watch what's going to happen there.
Ole Miss and Tulane Saturday night in Oxford. Tulane made noise with that second half at Oklahoma. They've been there in your city for the better part of a month. We just got through hearing from Jeff Conway, the Tulane wide receivers coach. Their story is really a remarkable story. How do you think they fare at Oxford, though?
Well, you know how I feel about Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss, obviously, in this matchup. I will say this, though. Willie Frisk can coach. Yeah. That guy's a good football coach. And I watched a good bit of that Tulane game against Oklahoma, and I was wanting to pull up Pratt's numbers because he's a good quarterback. He was 27 of 44, 269, and 3 touchdowns. Now, Oklahoma, their defense has been shaky even under Alex Grinch. But on the road, it wasn't a full stadium, but, on the road in a tough situation. And this kid, if you didn't watch that game, they had like 4th and 13 to end the game, and he sacrificed his body to try to get it. He is a tough player. I like Pratt. So, this is a team that'll score some points, I think, on Ole Miss, but I just don't think their defense can hold up. Oklahoma's offense moved the ball better. I think Ole Miss's offense can play with Oklahoma's offense at times, can be better. So I don't think their defense will be able to hold up, but I like Michael Pratt, and I think Tulane will be able to move the ball a little bit on Ole Miss. Though I'll have to say, I know I couldn't be with you last week. That Ole Miss defensive performance against Louisville, that is a changed defense. DJ Durkin obviously
much
has made
more
great strides
athletic,
with that defense. Yes, no doubt.
Deeper, more athletic, starting to show a little bit of a pass rush. And again, it was against Austin Peay, so who knows? But showing some last year they didn't get a pass rush on anybody. It didn't matter who they played.
No.
They couldn't get a pass rush, and this year they're showing some signs of life. I think they're a better football team. I think Ole Miss has a legitimate chance to be the second best team in the West.
Yeah, I think they've got that. I've got them at 10-2, and I think now that you have seen Texas A&M without Haynes King, even with Haynes King, by the way, let's just don't just rewind and make Haynes King Johnny Manziel. Even with Haynes King, they struggled in week 1 against an inferior opponent in Kent State, and then we're fortunate to win at Colorado. I think whether it's Calzada or King, that is a beatable football team. I don't think Texas A&M is invincible by any stretch of the imagination.
What did you think of Arkansas and Texas? Was that more Texas or was that Arkansas?
I think Texas is clearly not ready to play at the line of scrimmage in the Southeastern Conference. I think that shows you. And, look, I think I will own this one. You just talked about, getting the pat on the back for predicting Kentucky, and you deserve that. I am going to own what a mistake I made about Sam Pittman. I thought that was a panic, lazy, bad hire by Arkansas. I thought they got to the end of their list and they're like, well, this is a comfortable guy. We can get him on the cheap. Sam Pittman can coach football. And it's really impossible not to like him just because he brings such a good attitude. He's earned this spot. He's not been given this by any stretch of the imagination. This guy has earned this spot, and he's going in and he has sold these guys on something they haven't had in quite a while. And they play their tails off for him. I respect the heck out of what Sam Pittman has done. And look, the guy knows offensive line play, and they whipped Texas. They whipped Texas at the line of scrimmage. And I think that shows Steve Sarkisian, you better get that fixed now because that's your future. And it's only going to get tougher. Look, as much as I appreciate what Sam Pittman has done, Neal, the truth is that team still is fortunate to go to a bowl this year. That's how tough their schedule is. And that's the team that took Texas out behind the shed and whipped them in Fayetteville. It gets way tougher than that on the road in the SEC. That's not even as tough as it gets. It was a great atmosphere, but when you come to the Southeastern Conference, you still got to go to Jordan Hare and Brian Denny and Texas A&M. They know that, obviously. Tiger Stadium, Sanford Stadium. It's Florida. It's only going to get tougher for Texas.
It's like you just said with the LSU schedule. Look at what's coming up for LSU. Texas gets to go home this week and sort of lick its wounds and play nice. And hey, man, once you get into the meat of an SEC schedule and you go to Fayetteville,
it ain't easy.
And you get done with Fayetteville, guess what's next week? Auburn's coming to town, or Alabama's coming to town, or you got to go to Florida, or you got to go to Ole Miss or somebody where you're still, because you have that horn on your head and makes you a target.
Yeah.
And then
I'm sorry, Neal, you look at Arkansas, to your point, they play Georgia Southern this week, so they do get that breather. But then their next 4 games are against the team that is currently number 7, number 2, number 17 in Ole Miss, and number 22. You get one breather, and then you get 4 straight top 25 games, and that's just life for the SEC West, basically.
Yeah, you mentioned Pittman being a fit. I've always talked about Kiffin being a fit here because I think he is. I think Kiffin fits Ole Miss in a way that,
I agree.
It's hard to put into words unless you know the program. I probably wouldn't know about this if I weren't a little bit more familiar with Arkansas than I normally would be. You're right about Pittman. He fits that program culturally, and you see it in the way that the kids play for him. You see it at Ole Miss with Kiffin. It was its immediate response because of the fit was so good. The one thing that Arkansas does that nobody wants to talk about much until kind of now is every week they show up and play for that guy.
They do.
Always do. They, under Chad Morris, they rolled over all the time. Under Bielema, they rolled over all the time. Under this guy, they just play for him. And last year, they lost to LSU in a close game. They lost to Missouri in a close game. And I think they fell off the radar a bit. Alabama smoked them, but Alabama smoked everybody. And so this year they go in and they were a little sluggish against Rice, and now they blow out Texas. And I think they have a legitimate shot next week against Texas A&M. I really do.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, I do too. And that's normally a pretty crazy rivalry there, those two playing in Dallas. But and I'll say this too. I think the biggest thing Pittman did was he hired Barry Odom as his defensive coordinator. And Odom gives a lot of schools. If you go back and look at even last year, Neal, when they were 3-7, probably should have been 5-5.
Yeah.
Alabama included in this. Mac Jones struggled against that defense about as much as he struggled against anybody all year. Mississippi State was coming off that huge win down at Texas A&M or down at LSU, looked like the best team in the country, and they'd go up against Odom's defense. They couldn't move the football.
Yeah.
Week after week, you look at Arkansas, and they would give somebody trouble defensively, stuff they hadn't seen all year. So I like that staff, and I like what he's doing there. But there again, you're doing it in the SEC West. It is hard to make up ground in that division.
It is. It's really hard. Listen, thanks so much for the time. Look forward to doing this again next week. Enjoy the weekend of football, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Neal, it's always fun. Thank you.
That was Ryan Brown of The Next Round. They're in Birmingham, always kind enough to spend time with us. Another guy who's always kind enough to spend time with us. He'll be with us Saturday night after Ole Miss Tulane. That's Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 ESPN in Memphis. We talked more college football with Jeffrey. A lot of Ole Miss talk in this interview, some SEC, some national, Oregon, Ohio State, some of that kind of thing. So here's Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright, 92.9 FM ESPN in Memphis, joins us as he always does here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Jeffrey, how are you?
I'm doing well, my man. How about yourself?
I could complain. Nobody would care. It's all good. I'm good. Ready for week 3. Ole Miss and Tulane Saturday night at Vaught-Hemingway. We'll start there because we do this little eye test thing that was your idea, not mine. It was a great idea. And so we're going to kind of go off that. Am I crazy? I get this question all the time. Everybody goes, why are you so high on Ole Miss? Because normally I'm not particularly high on Ole Miss the last few years. It's because so far, and again, they've only played Louisville and Austin Peay. And that's who's been on their schedule, and that's all they could play so far. But so far in those 2 games, they've passed the eye test for me kind of with flying colors. Like I generally like what I see. The people that get hung up on, in the third quarter on Saturday, I don't care. It was 37-0. I mean, you know what I mean? It was 37-7 at the half. You go in at the half.
To your point, when I do a lot of statistical analysis right now, I'm basically eliminating the fourth quarters.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Corral wasn't playing. The defense was out there. There was no pressure on Austin Peay. Nothing against them. I mean, they knew they weren't going to win the game. Ole Miss knew it wasn't going to lose the game. There's a human element that kicks in at 37-0.
Well, and as we discussed, they played on Monday night.
Yeah, and didn't get back until late Tuesday. And their coach had the whole COVID positive thingy, and they only practiced a couple of times, and it was get their feet under them, and they didn't watch. They just sort of showed up and played. Tulane's got a chance, I guess, to be an interesting test, but I think you and I are on the same page here. Tulane's a great story, and those kids have been through a bunch, and having to go to Birmingham for 4 weeks or whatever it is and play all their games at practice at different places, practice at Tuscaloosa one day, at a high school in Birmingham one day, at UAB one day, at Legion Field one day. I mean, that's a challenge. And I'm glad they get to go home next week and play UAB at their place, which is great for them. And when Oklahoma made the mistake of turning it off, Tulane, to its credit, did not turn it off and made that one hell of a football game. But I'm having a hard time completely buying into this narrative that, oh yeah, this is a serious test for Ole Miss. I'm not sure that I buy it completely.
I guess it depends on how do you define serious test. I mean, I think that this is the type of team that I think if you play well, when I look at this number, if they play well, they're going to cover. But I do think it is the type of team that has enough athletes and they've got a good enough scheme that if you waltz in like they did kind of Saturday, you know what I mean? Like you could find yourself in a weird football game like Oklahoma did, in that if you look at how the game started, Tulane goes right down the field, but from basically the second quarter on, Oklahoma controlled the entire game. Like, you know, I would imagine from probably the second quarter on, their win percentage was in the high 90s, just from the way the game played out. And then they had a couple of stupid turnovers, and then the onside kick happens. Like, okay, but like, let's apply context to that. That's not normal football. You know what I mean? Like, those are exceptional things. But down to down, Oklahoma beat Tulane pretty good. And to me, I see the same thing with Ole Miss in that I was highly impressed by them on Labor Day night from the sense of even when things got off script, they calmly, coolly got it right back on script. And then defensively, they just did not look overwhelmed. I mean, we can do the whole Louisville stinks thing, and perhaps I'm not ruling that out. I mean, that was kind of one of the takeaways I had on that night. But let's not kid ourselves. Ole Miss didn't stop anyone last year. Bad offenses. I mean, South Carolina had one of the worst offenses in the league last year, and Ole Miss couldn't do anything. And so, you know, to me, I don't particularly care about quality of opponent when we're considering what Ole Miss's defense was last year. Like, it did not matter who it was. They were going to score on them. And then on Saturday, I mean, you know, they came out and handled business and whatnot. So to me, they've had two opportunities to put a score up, if you will, on the eye test, and they passed both for me pretty highly.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, yeah, you know, Drummond drops the ball in the end zone. Mingo gets a call that maybe it was a touchdown, maybe it wasn't a touchdown, but it was fine. Whatever. It was the game was.
If you're nitpicking that game, you're working to nitpick. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you're nitpicking that game, you're trying too hard. So I want to move on.
I think this is. Let's make this point because I think it encompasses everything. If you're trying to make context of a season, that is the game that is neither going to improve someone's case or hamper someone's case. Like, those are the games that they're nothing. Let's be real. They're buy games. They're designed to make money. And you know what I mean? Like, there are those games. It
would be as if you were nitpicking the Alabama Mercer game. Correct. I mean, it's literally the same.
That was the same thing that popped in my head.
You know, why?
Exactly.
You know, if you're nitpicking Auburn in the fourth quarter against Alabama State, one way or the other,
exactly,
you're wasting your time. All right, so Tulane comes in. Pratt's a nice quarterback. He doesn't turn the ball over much. Does a few things well. Competes like a son of a bitch. It's a solid coaching staff. I think Willie Fritz has done a terrific job. You talk to coaches around football, and they all have an immense amount of respect for him. I think he gets the most out of the talent that he has. Lane Kiffin did the Nick Saban coaching thing on Monday where he's like, this is an SEC team, but this is not an SEC team.
Let me pull up the team talent ranking. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Tulane's probably in the high 80s, probably, right?
Yeah, 70s to 80s. Yeah, they're
now they are. I will say this: they're the most annoying type of team to play because, as you mentioned, Pratt is the guy that doesn't have all the tools, but he has enough tools and he plays really hard. So that's freaking annoying to go against.
And he's a smart quarterback. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes.
And then, you know, when you look at Tulane in general, like they all kind of take on that identity in which Willie Fritz has always had the identity of do more with less. And that is something that has always been a part of what they are. But at the same time, like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, that's the whole point of it. It's that do more with less. This is a team that typically goes, you know, 500 or slightly better in the American. They're at 82 on the team talent ranking.
And they're sort of due the psychological part of it. They're sort of due a letdown a little bit. You know, they played super brave, if you will, at Oklahoma when they had every excuse that day to go, screw this, let's get out of here.
Correct. That's what I'm talking about, like on the annoying factor that they don't quit. Like when everyone was just like, all right, whatever. Like we got paid whatever we did. You know, this game was supposed to be a home game. It's not. Like, let's just get out of here.
Stuff going on at home. This sort of sucks. No one likes us. We got
correct.
Yeah, and then you know,
when do we get to go back to New Orleans does my family have power? Yes, all those things.
Yeah. So they beat Morgan State. And I like Ole Miss to cover. I think you do too. I want to get to some other games that I think are really interesting and along our eye test thing. Auburn and Penn State, Saturday night. Penn State, for what little they've had on the eye test, they've sort of passed it. I mean, kind of. They're not particularly good at quarterback. They're pretty good at defense. They're a James Franklin sort of team. They can run the ball. They're physical. They play hard. They'll hit you. They're not afraid to get a little dirty. All that stuff. And meanwhile, Auburn, I don't know what I think. I mean, Auburn has had 2 assignments. They're both easy assignments, but they've aced them, and they've looked good. This is like this really interesting game because at the end of this one on Saturday, we're going to know a lot about these 2 teams that we don't know anything about right now, other than Penn State. Going to Wisconsin and winning is an accomplishment, and they do have that in their back pocket, and Auburn doesn't have that yet.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think these teams are really similar in that both rosters are pretty good, but not elite. You know what I mean? Like they are top 15-ish type rosters, and both have had inconsistent quarterback play from the same guys. You know what I mean? Sean Clifford is an inconsistent quarterback. Bo Nix thus far in his career has been an inconsistent quarterback. I'm fascinated by this with Bo Nix. Bo Nix is finally playing in a real offense. Like, everyone can do this whole Gus Malzahn didn't get where he did. It's a gimmick offense. It is. Like, let's be real. I love when everyone's like, well, when you're running the ball, the offense works. Neal, name me an offense that doesn't work when you're running the ball. Like, holy hell. That means I get to do the least risky thing and move the football. I can't believe that that's successful. Oh, they have to sell out to stop the run, and now I get to throw to guys that are wide open because of play action. Like, duh. But we're starting to see a much more structured offense, an offense that is a little bit more of, okay, I know what I'm looking at on the field. There's structure to it, and it's not a high school offense. And I'm curious to see. He has looked more comfortable. He still is Bo Nix. He will still have the erratic high throw and whatnot. But Sean Clifford will give you plenty of those as well. And
for sure.
So kind of like the way that I look at it, I think this game's going to play out more similarly to the Wisconsin game, in which I think it's going to have big game feel. We know the crowd's going to be electric. The atmosphere is going to be awesome. I kind of think both teams are going to be feeling each other out for the first half, and I think there's going to be a lot of, hey, a punt's not a bad play. Because, if you look at what I think Auburn's back end is good on the defense, and where Penn State has been able to move the balls when they can get explosive in the passing game. And I don't know if Auburn's going to allow them to do that. And so I think you're going to kind of see something rock fight adjacent early. And then I think it's going to come down to which guy's going to make fewer mistakes. And I think conventional wisdom would say, well, take the home guy. I think Bo Nix has made more big-time plays in big moments than Sean Clifford has.
And Auburn's got those 2 backs now that are really good, and I think they're going to run it. I love the first half under in this game. I think you're right. I think they're going to. It's going to be the boxing match where you're protecting the whole time. You're dancing a little. You just kind of want to see what are they trying to beat me with.
Yeah,
and then you react. All right, Florida and Alabama. We know about Alabama. Florida, to me, Jeffrey, has not passed an eye test.
Okay, so I guess it's just me and you. Everyone else keeps talking about, well, their offense, like Emory Jones has made some mistakes and turnovers. Like, I've watched every snap of the FAU game and the USF game. They've been wildly unimpressive to me.
I agree completely. The one quarterback, Richardson, ran a little bit. Okay, great, but that won't beat Alabama. That's not going to beat good teams. That's not enough. I mean, they're talented. I don't know where they are on the talent scale. I would guess somewhere in the teens. They're a talented team. They've got a nice roster, but there's nothing about
7th, according to this.
7th. Yeah, it seems high. But there's nothing about them that just blows me away. Nothing. And people are because it's the first big CBS game of the year, people are trying to hype this as something. I think Alabama can name its score. Am I crazy?
No, well, I mean, the problem that we have is we're seeing it the same way. And so, I'd like to talk to someone that has the counter view, because the counter view that I've heard, I don't buy. The counter view is Dan Mullen will scheme it up, and Dan Mullen will. Okay, well, let's go back to why everyone says this. We had a drunken football game in the SEC championship game last year. But if you remember how the game played out, Alabama built up a 3-score lead. And then they did hold on for dear life. But there's one key difference. It's one thing to scheme up a great player and get him one-on-one. And that's what he did with Pitts. He schemed up Pitts, and I guess Tony to a little bit of an extent. But he found ways to get them one-on-one, and there's a reason why those were 2 first-round draft picks. And Alabama couldn't cover either of them for the most part.
And Trask was the kind of quarterback that can bother Alabama. Big guy, big arm, can push the ball down the field with big receivers who can go get the ball. We talked about that. Now they're doing this thing, hey, we're going to run it, and we're gonna, that doesn't work.
No, I mean, to me, I think this game is going to play out similarly to the Miami game. I mean, I think Dan is a better football coach, obviously, than Rhett Lashley, because Rhett runs a stupid offense. Guess where he learned it from.
Saban probably wants this game to be more competitive than Miami. He probably would like for this to be a little bit more of a test, because he needs his team. You could see that last week. He got frustrated with them. He does not need his team sleepwalking. And they're kids. He doesn't need his team sleepwalking through the building going, nobody can beat us. They just can't.
I agree with you, but he doesn't like in a big game. I think he would much rather get scared by Ole Miss than get scared by Florida. I think he knows in the end, I'm probably going to be able to make an extra play against Ole Miss no matter how bad it gets. I think he fears there's more talent on Florida.
Yeah, because Ole Miss is not 7th in the talent rankings. I mean, correct. Yeah, they don't have that. They don't have that kind of defensive talent. We're
talking 27th. You see, like,
massive difference.
And I think he would much rather see them get tested that way. I don't know. Like I'll be happy to be wrong. I mean, I was wrong on Ohio State last week. I just don't see this one. I think Florida was a lot better last year, and I also think I'm kind of flagging this. See if you dig. That's Mullen's best team, probably, right?
Last year?
Yeah. I mean, I know it fell apart at the end, but in terms of, like, he won the East, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it probably was. I mean, it was such a weird year.
That's my thing.
With all the COVID stuff and all that. I don't even fault him or anybody else whose team kind of lost it a little at the end, because
I'm mainly just talking about season.
But talented, yeah. Look, he had a big time quarterback, and he had.
I'm kind of flagging them though. I think there might have. I think that may have been a little more fool's gold than actual gold last year, in that they were loaded on offense. And what we're talking about, they had a guy that got drafted in the 2nd round at quarterback. They have 2 first-round skill guys. They're pretty good up front. They were better equipped to take advantage. Like, we saw so many situations last year where if you just got guys one-on-one, defenses just could not do very much. I'm kind of keeping an eye on it this year to see now that teams that aren't going to be overwhelmed against 1 or 2 guys, and you sit there and you go, how do we cover this guy? How do we cover that guy? I'm interested to see Florida as this season progresses. I think they could quietly get an 8-4 in them.
I do too, because they've got a couple of weird games coming up, including one at Kentucky that I think is a problem for them. I really do, because Kentucky for me it's not blowing away the eye test, but I generally like what I see, and Kentucky could have easily blown Missouri out. I mean, Kentucky kind of shot itself in the foot a couple of times, and that counts. Don't get me wrong. And I give credit to Missouri for making the plays to stay in the game.
Oh, for sure.
But I also know what I saw, which was Kentucky dominated.
Listen, they get credit for recovering the fumbles, but both of those fumbles were user error.
Right.
I mean, and we're talking about a 21-point game. I think the thing that has been impressive about them is they have added a big passing element to their game.
Yep.
And again, let's not no one's going to mistake it for Mahomes out there.
No, he's not Aaron Rodgers or something, but he has the capability of throwing the ball down the field, and they have receivers who can go get it. And so therefore you have to scheme it. You can't scheme them the way that people schemed them before, which is, hey, the quarterback can't really throw. If he beats us here and there with a crossing route or something, it's no big deal. He can't put several throws together. We just have to stop the run. As long as we stop the run with that big offensive line, we'll be okay. We can stack the box, we can play numbers, and we'll be all right. Well, now you can't do that against them, because if you stack the box too much, they'll play action and they'll go over the top on you, and he is capable of putting some throws together.
And they have not lost their identity on, running the football.
It's Mark Stoops' team.
Yeah, the only thing I see that's a little different is you're watching them probably a little bit more like under center, outside zone, inside zone. But I mean, they still very much have the same type of identity and DNA. It's just now I think they've leveled up with Levis.
All right, a couple of things, because I want to get to some national teams and get some thoughts on whether those teams are real or not. Mississippi State and Memphis.
Yeah.
Mississippi State was bad against Louisiana Tech. They were pretty good against North Carolina State. Got the return right out of the gate and kind of just dominated the game against the Wolfpack. Memphis has scored a bunch of points. It's given up a bunch of points. It's a big game at the Liberty Bowl. Memphis typically gets sky high for these SEC games at home, and they win their share of them. What do you expect?
So I'm a little concerned. I guess the way that I see it, at least playing out, the script that I think we'll see, Mississippi State has a below average SEC offensive line. That's a fair statement, correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And the way that they play offense, they don't run the football. It's not part of their deal. It's what we just talked about. If you're preparing for them, you don't have to really worry about the run. They're not going to do it.
The one situation, though, Memphis is not good enough up front on defense to, I think, pose a consistent issue for Mississippi State on the offensive line. They didn't pose really an issue for Arkansas State, and for the most part against Nicholls State, they did not present much of a problem up front. McIntyre is basically having to bring pressure, blitz to bring pressure. That's not a great formula. And then on the other side, you've got a Mississippi State defense that I think is pretty good. Do I think it's
I do too.
One of their, 5 best that we've seen? Probably not, but I think this is a really physical, tough defense.
I do too, because I'm going to tell you, not to interrupt you.
No.
But there are a couple of games next week in the SEC that I think have a chance to change the whole paradigm of everything we've said in the preseason, everything we've said in the first 3 weeks. I think Mississippi State can beat LSU next week. And I think Arkansas can. I'm not predicting wins. I think Arkansas can line up and play with Texas A&M in the type of game that gives them a chance to get into the fourth quarter, where if you get into the fourth quarter, it's just a play here and a play there. It's no longer having to dominate a football game. I actually believe Arkansas can take Texas A&M to the fourth quarter, and I think Mississippi State can take LSU to the fourth quarter. And if you told me that the Bulldogs and the Hogs won those games, I'm not shocked. And God, that would send shockwaves through the West, but it shouldn't, because if you look at what we've seen so far, I get it. I'm not blown. I mean, LSU does not look good at all. Mississippi State at least has done a few things well. LSU hasn't.
So if you filter out garbage time, LSU on yards per play offensively is 13th, averaging slightly about 4.6 yards per play. They are closer to Vanderbilt, and yards per play than they are South Carolina. Vanderbilt dead last. South Carolina is at 12.
Yeah.
It's a problem. Like, everyone wants to talk about scheme, and, they're back to being comfortable in offense, and they've got all these great receivers. Well,
they're bad up front. Hell, he even admits that they're bad up front. And the quarterback is inconsistent, and they just lost their best running back.
I want to defend their line a little bit. I'm not saying that they're good. What I'm saying is the scheme that they run essentially empties the backfield, and everyone sees and goes, well, let's bring 6. And yes, those receivers are talented, but the way that it worked at the level where you sit there and you go, oh my God, this is the greatest offense I've ever seen with Burrow. How many times did you see Burrow get the snap, look to his left, feel a guy coming from his right on a rush, quick little sidestep, move a little outside the pocket, and then throw a dime?
I told you this the other day. I watched the Bengals and Vikings, and in that game, there was Joe Burrow, there was Jamar Chase, and is it Justin Jefferson?
Justin Jefferson, yeah.
All those cats were together in Baton Rouge against college defenses. And
with Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, and you watch that and you go, oh, not only are they replacing talent, they're replacing elite talent. Because in that game, Jefferson was the best receiver for the Vikings. Chase has emerged in his very first NFL game as the go-to guy for the Bengals. And Burrow, who's still not completely over the knee thing, still just drops dimes.
Oh, I mean, he checked. Think of the balls on him. He checked to the 4th down play where it was 4th and whatever inches or, a foot maybe. And he checks the pass to win the game, and he threw an absolute dime. Here's what confuses me. In the NFL, I think scheme matters more than in college football.
Because all the players are so good.
Correct. Why is it, and I'm not saying guys, scheme guys don't get credit, but the credit that they get is at an insanely high level in college. Like, you see guys that, because LSU's never watched anything, LSU fans only watch LSU football. They finally saw something that resembled an offense from 2010. Why in college football do we have this cult of it's the coach? And I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, this team is loaded and I can draw up plays. Look
no further than Steve Sarkisian.
Yes.
He's at Alabama last year. No one can stop them because you've got Devontae Smith and you've got Waddle and you've got Mac Jones and you've got the cat in the backfield who was a first-round pick. And you've got this offensive line that's so good. Now you go to Texas and you got Card.
Najee. Yeah.
Yeah, you got Najee Harris back there. He's got a good tailback at Texas, but that's it. And so you got Barry Odom looking at him last week and going, you know what? I'm going to take that running back away, and I'm going to make that quarterback beat me because I don't think he can. And he couldn't.
Well, I don't even know if he said, I don't think he can. I think he said, I'm going to find out if he can.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and if he can, he can. Right. But right. I'm not going to sit here and get beat by that running back. He's not going to run for 160 against me. That's essentially what Odom said.
Right. And if a redshirt freshman comes in and lights you up early, well, then you can adjust. But I think he did what most reasonable human beings would do. I got a guy who's making his first road start. We're geeked up.
He's got a good defense. They're good.
He's got players.
They've got good players on defense. They're I think it's eye test thing. I think still they're a little undervalued right now. Everyone's looking at them going, well, Texas sucks. And I'm like, yep, I'm just telling you, they're not so bad. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Arkansas is winning 9 games or 8 games or anything like that, but they've got the type of team that you have to show up and play. Like, I think Arkansas can beat Mississippi State. If they take away the run at home against Auburn, that's a fourth quarter game.
I think at this point, they have the best established identity. of a football team. I think they know exactly what they are. And they are a tough, physical, hard-nosed football team. He's good up front on both sides. The quarterback's limited. There's no getting around KJ Jefferson being limited.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to account for him. And he's got multiple backs that he can give the ball to, and they don't I don't feel like you're ever going to see Pittman yelling at Kendall Briles, why'd you do that? Like, they know what they are. You know what I mean? Like, they know what they are. And then obviously with Odom, that's a seasoned vet. That guy's he falls into the category of best co-pilot and maybe doesn't need to fly left seat, but he's a pretty damn good defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and they've got good players, Morgan and Catalan and some of those guys.
They play
got good
hard.
players. Yeah, they love him and they play hard. All right, I want to ask you about a couple of national teams. We both got burned badly, and it was pointed out, and that's fine. I can handle it. We both got burned badly on Ohio State last
week. I realize what I have to telling me I was wrong on a college football pick. By the way, I'm 20-12-1. So again, you can burn me all you want, but at the same time, it's like I got no problem admitting I was wrong. I will admit this though. I did not think that Oregon could come in there and run it down their throat like they did.
Well, that's where I was going. So tell me about Oregon. Is Oregon a legitimate team, or was that just one day?
Oregon is a legitimate team. Are they a legitimate national title contender? I still lean no. I think Ohio State.
As of today, who is a legitimate national title contender?
There's one of them. It's Alabama.
It's Alabama.
I mean, I think we're going to get there's a good chance we get some fresh new blood this year, Neal. That playoff could look different.
Is Oregon a legitimate top 4 team?
I mean, who's got a better resume than them right now? The problem that Oregon's going to have is they go to UCLA, to Utah. Like, I don't trust them to stay unblemished. I mean, we haven't seen anyone go unblemished in the Pac-12 since, I believe, Oregon in 2010, and the Washington team that went like 12 or 13-1. If you go look at that schedule, they did well. They made sure that they were going to be in position to have that kind of season. I think Saturday was more of Ohio State being dumb and Ohio State being really, really arrogant. And I think Ohio State lined up and they said, here it is, boys.
Yep.
And Joe Moorhead found like 4 plays. Like, it was insane. They would bring tight end in motion, and then the receivers would crash down. Everything would flow this way, and they'd run it back this way. Like, it was, and there was nobody home. And then, they tagged a speed option off of it too. Like, they did it. They made it look a few other ways, but they were basically running the same concept the entire day. And I mean, Neal, until those final 2 possessions where they were just trying to run out the clock, they were averaging 8 yards a carry.
All right, let me get you to the next team. Have you looked at the rest of Iowa's schedule?
Yeah.
We joke about Iowa here, and I get it, and it's funny and blah, blah, blah. But they beat Indiana.
Yeah.
They go to Iowa State and win. Here's the rest of their schedule. Kent State, Colorado State, at Maryland. They do have to play Penn State, but it's at home on October the 9th. Purdue. They do have to go to Camp Randall on October the 30th. They go to Northwestern. They get Minnesota at home, Illinois at home, and they finish on Friday the 26th of November at Nebraska.
So
can Iowa run the table? The regular season table?
Here's the issue that Iowa's going to have. I'm pulling it up. Filtering out garbage time. They average 4.09 yards per play.
Yeah.
That is 122nd in the nation. And here is who is around them. It is a list of who's who in college football. We have the Vanderbilt Commodores ahead of them.
Okay.
South Florida ahead of them. They are slightly ahead of Akron, UMass, Indiana, Rutgers, Navy, Georgia State, UConn, and ULM.
Where are they? Where are they on defense?
Let's see. On defensive plays, yards per play, Iowa is stat and rank. They are 25th in yards per play, and opponent completion percentage 7th in the country. Yards per attempt 21st. I mean, here's the problem. They've been pretty good on turnovers.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you look at it in terms of forcing turnovers, they've got to be darn near the top at 7. And I guarantee if it's points off turnovers, yeah, they are the only team that has forced more. No, they're tied for 7 turnovers is the most forced turnovers. And so I think Iowa is really good, but I actually think like Maryland could be a tricky game because Maryland is explosive.
Yeah, at Maryland. Yeah.
The problem is Iowa's not seen a team yet that does anything that you have to account for, like that, where they're going to get in trouble. Like Penn State's going to be a problem for them because Penn State can be explosive down the field. Doesn't mean that Iowa can't play well. Like, you know what I mean? Like they've gone up against explosive offenses.
Sure.
If you're asking me to bet, do I think they go undefeated? No. 10-2, I think, is out there.
Yeah, you're probably right. When you're winning on turnovers like that, you run the risk of being fool's gold because it's hard to keep that up over the course of an entire season.
Well, it's just there is such thing as forcing turnovers. We acknowledge that. There's also turnover luck. Like maybe forcing the turnover, but then turning them into the points that they've done defensively. Like I just don't know how repeatable that is.
Anybody else catching your eye so far?
In terms of
being good enough to make the playoff.
Beyond the obvious,
Georgia's so good defensively that it's hard to see them losing a game until they get to Alabama.
And perhaps by then they will have enough pieces back to be explosive on offense. Teams that I have watched and liked. I mean, UCLA was impressive in week 1. I still think the Pac-12 is going to do what it always does. I think they're just going to beat themselves up. I think they're going to play themselves out. I don't think someone is so good. Like with Oregon, I think Oregon could be at that level. I do not think Anthony Brown is a type of quarterback to get you to a playoff. I just don't. I don't.
And that's
see
like,
that.
and see, that's where I am with Oklahoma. I just don't know that defensively they're going to be good enough to be any different than what they've been in the past. And so.
And I don't think Rattler is at the level that the other guys have been.
Yeah, I don't think Rattler's in the same ballpark with Matt Corral.
Well, I'm even talking about like they've been bad on defense before.
Oh, well, you're talking about with Baker Mayfield and
I don't even think I think Hurts is better.
Oh wow!
And we know how I feel about Hurts.
Yeah, he's an NFL quarterback, so I give him credit, but I don't. No one. I've never watched Jalen Hurts in the NFL and said that guy's going to carry his team the way that
college and say that.
That's true. All right, very last thing. What's USC going to do? What should they do?
So here's what I think is the most fascinating thing that I'm rooting for. I'm secretly rooting for Penn State to be a playoff team.
Oh.
Can that?
James Franklin can't leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what if this thing gets to November and they're a playoff contender and USC's waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting for them? Which, to be clear, I understand. I think Franklin would work there. I think he checks their boxes. Flashy, showman. And you and I both think he's full of it, but guess what? That entire profession's full of plenty of people that are full of it.
Sure.
But he's a pretty good roster developer. I think he's got a pretty good eye for talent. Even at Vanderbilt, man, he put guys in the league. He found guys and put them in the league. I think he's got a good eye for it.
Their schedule would be really hard to run. I mean, beyond Auburn, they still have to go at Iowa, at Ohio State, at Maryland, Michigan at home, at Michigan State. I mean, a tough sled for them to get to undefeated. And
I think if their schedule's hard enough, I think they could be a one-loss team, and as long as they won the Big Ten, they'd get in.
Yeah, they'd have to beat Ohio State,
Correct.
or whoever and probably Ohio State in the championship. So they'll get 2 cracks at them. Yeah,
but that's what I'm rooting for. I'll be honest with you. I know this may not be popular to say in our profession. Am I the only person that goes, has anyone seen when Luke Fickell had a real job? It's the last time Ohio State lost to Michigan. And why does no one ever do this calculus that I feel like you and I discuss all the time? There's only been one person recently that hasn't massively won at Cincinnati. That's our boy.
Tuberville.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah, and
Tommy was legitimately stealing a paycheck. But think about this. In terms of the American coaches, the coaches from the American Athletic that have gotten the big job, only one hit so far. And it was the guy that took Temple and made Temple good. And then he went and took Baylor and made Baylor good. And now he's in the NFL. I would just be I think far too often what gets established is, well, he's the best coach at that level. Let's bring him up. That level's no different than any other level in the sense that there are better jobs in that conference than there. It's the same thing with Frost. Why did no one go, he's undefeated at UCF? No, duh. It's a great job at that level.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
I actually think Frost, his failures at Nebraska is going to hurt Fickell a little bit in this cycle.
I also don't buy the immediate connection that because Bone was, I don't think you fire a guy in 24 hours to settle on the guy.
Well, and hiring a coach at Cincinnati and hiring a coach at USC are completely different things, and you're fishing in completely different ponds. And when you're the guy at Cincinnati and you can hire Luke Fickell away from Ohio State to go to Cincinnati, it makes a ton of sense. When you're
like with Franklin, let's take a look at it this way. Like, yes, there were factors that made Vanderbilt be able to be a 9-win team. Tennessee was horrific. Georgia was at the end.
I know where you're going, and I will never cheapen what he did at Vanderbilt. Nobody else ever does it. Nobody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. No one has done it. No one did it before. No one has done it since.
He's not a great person. He is a very good, borderline great coach. Yeah. To me, if I'm USC, that's the guy that has to tell me no.
Yes. I mean, I know the other names. I'm sorry. I don't want Matt Campbell for that job. I think Matt Campbell is in the Pat Fitzgerald category for me. And once upon a time, the David Cutcliffe, and now maybe the Dave Clawson. I think he is very good at getting the most out of a team and most out of a roster.
And he likes coaching those types of players.
Exactly.
And you can stay there, and he can stay there for a long time, and he's perfectly fine. Look, there's no shame in being Pat Fitzgerald and collecting a check at Northwestern for the better part of 2 decades.
Wait, you get rich and they're never going to fire you?
Yeah,
How many jobs out there today can you truly say, unless scandal or just the type of crater that means I quit doing my job? How many jobs out there can you really not get fired from?
I mean, there aren't many, and he's got one of them.
Exactly.
And they love him, and he can stay there for a long time. And Matt Campbell's in the exact same boat. And, you talk to people who know Matt Campbell, and they're like, he'd probably be more intrigued by an NFL job than he would I
can buy that, because it's the same thing that makes him good at the college level would make him good at that level. It's at the margins.
People say that about Fitzgerald. People say, hey, look, don't be shocked if this doesn't work with the Bears. Don't be shocked if Fitzgerald's on the small list of candidates there. I mean, who knows, right? It's September the 15th.
It's back, baby.
I feel for the USC beat writers who have to chase every rumor under the sun, like calling the Jacksonville guys and going, "Hey, I need you to ask Urban. Just ask."
You gotta tip your cap to the agent community. It took them no fewer than 38 seconds to start getting names out there.
Yeah, it's how you get your guys' money. All right. Thanks for the time. We'll talk to you on Saturday late night after. Yeah, I know. I'm like already.
I'm letting you know this right now. I will be not sloppy drunk, but I will be a bottle of wine in.
I probably will be there with you, so it might be entertaining for the people. It might not, but we'll find out. Hey, thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. That was Jeffrey Wright. I think I will be at least a bottle in by the end of Ole Miss Tulane. God, it's a late game. I'm ready for an earlier game. I know you guys love the night games. I'm happy for you. It's a area where we're just never going to – fans and media are never going to get on the same page here. Media like early, fans like late. Is what it is. All right, that was Jeffrey Wright. So also talked college football, Ole Miss, some SEC, and some NFL with Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. Here's Ben. Ben Mintz, Barstool Sports, joins us again, as he always does, for the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Ben, good to see you, man. How you been?
Oh, good to be seen as always, Neal. Thank you very much for having me on. Just love the product you've got with this show. You got a bunch of good guests, and a lot of momentum for Ole Miss this season, to say the least, at 2-0, and just getting excited about what's all of a sudden become a much more interesting Saturday night matchup with Tulane than maybe we thought a month ago. After the second half they played at Oklahoma, almost coming back and pulling the shocker of the season, losing 40-35, and I think Ole Miss, because of that, is going to be ready for this game and is taking it seriously.
Let's just start there. Let's start with Ole Miss. Ole Miss, a 14-point favorite. At least that's the line that I've got. It's moved around a little bit maybe during the week, but I've got it right around 14 and a half points at home against Tulane. As you mentioned, 7 o'clock game on ESPN2. Kind of give me your thoughts on the game. Give me your thoughts on the betting line.
This is fun. It's fun for me to be on this side because everybody else is on the other. But I think people nationally, everybody's overvaluing that Tulane second half against Oklahoma, like way too much. And you hear Lane Kiffin talking about Tulane being an SEC team. Look, I got so much respect for Willie Fritz and what he's built. That's not an easy place to win. They got a new stadium, a lot of momentum. All that's great. But they ain't winning this football game. And they are a public underdog. People are saying, Tulane's got a shot. No, they don't. This is their 4th week on the road since Hurricane Ida, too, not their first. And I'm not saying Ida's even the reason. I don't think they could stop Ole Miss. The over-under 76.5. I'm much more inclined to lay 14 in a game where I think Ole Miss is going to score in the 40s or 50s anyway. I don't just like Ole Miss. I love Ole Miss in this game. I think they roll by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Pretty big, like something like 49-24, somewhere in that range. And I think Ole Miss with the bye week next week too, they're really going to be honed in and ready to go after that Austin Peay game. And so I think we're going to have a really good Ole Miss effort heading into the bye, and Ole Miss rolls.
Let me ask you this, Ben. Jeffrey Wright and I do this eye test thing, and I kind of like what we do with it. When people have asked me, I got a mailbag question this week, and it was a really good question. It was like, hey, Neal, what is it about Ole Miss that you like so much more than what everybody else likes? And I said, that's a great question. It's more than fair. And my answer is, It's really elementary, but I think you'll be able to relate to it, Ben. It's they look like a good team. It's an eye test thing. I mean, there's some teams that are out there that are 2-0, and you look at them and you're like, I don't know, like they just they're okay. It's like, you watch Texas against Arkansas, and you're like, yep, that's the Texas team that I kind of thought. That's what I was expecting. I expected a team that really didn't pass the eye test. Ole Miss passes the eye test.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a few points on that to follow up on. Ole Miss, with this up-tempo offense with Matt Corral and all the weapons and speed, they score infinity against these G5 teams. I mean, like, for Ole Miss to struggle on offense, they got to get beat at the line of scrimmage, and Tulane can't do that. Ole Miss does have a good offensive line, and so when Ole Miss plays these G5 teams, man, they just score and they score and they score and they score. The possessions are so fast. And then the other thing is, man, what a difference Chance Campbell has made on the eye test. I mean, just having him out there at middle linebacker, you could just – I mean, I know he's just a transfer, but he averaged 11 tackles a game at Maryland. You just feel like he's just got that presence. The way he spotted him, Lee Cunningham shut him down, and just him alone makes me feel so much better about this defense. And on that eye test, what I've seen out of this defense is you're not seeing the busted assignments that we've been seeing the last few years. Like, even when teams are moving the ball, there are hats there to hit them. Nobody's running free. People aren't blowing coverages, and to me, that says a lot on that eye test.
All right, let's get to some other games that I think are pretty interesting. And and then we'll get to the NFL in a minute, but I do want to get as much college football as you watch. I would be crazy not to get your thoughts on a few teams. I'm more interested in your thoughts on Texas A&M, not just in this game against New Mexico. They're giving 27.5, but you've seen them a couple of times. King's out now, 3 to 7 weeks. It's a broken bone. It's probably longer than 3 weeks. What does this do for the Texas A&M big picture?
I mean, it ain't great. They do have a heck of a defense, though. And Elko, the defensive coordinator, I think is extremely underrated. You know, last year I thought they had the best defense in the SEC, and they're going to have to lean on that defense. Lyell, I believe is how you say it, that defensive lineman's unreal. But they're going to have to lean on it. You know, you saw the offense struggle so much, only scoring 10. And then let's be honest, I watched Haynes King in that opener, and I mean, he didn't look that good in that game either himself. And so they're going to have to lean on that defense, keep getting by. You know, it's not good for them long term, but at least they've got New Mexico and some weaker games. I know Alabama's coming in a few weeks, and that's going to be awful tough. But, you know, when you look at this from an Ole Miss perspective, I mean, all of a sudden things are opening up in this West. LSU's a big disappointment. I was wrong about that. I admit it. I drank all the Kool-Aid with all my sources, ESPN Baton Rouge. But, I mean, their O-line stinks. They're not well coached. They're not good. And then we don't know about Auburn yet. We'll find out a lot more about them when they go to Happy Valley, but I still don't have any faith in Bo Nix. And I didn't like the Harsin hire really at all. I didn't think he doesn't have any South ties. I'm not a big Mike Bobo fan either. We've seen him recycled everywhere as an offensive coordinator. And so with A&M looking weaker on offense, LSU struggling, I mean, there's a chance Ole Miss could be the second best team in the West if things break right and they stay healthy. So I just really hope Ole Miss can seize that moment.
What do you think about Mississippi State at Memphis? You've nailed Mississippi State 2 weeks in a row now. They are a 3-point favorite at Memphis. I mean, these are those games, you know this really well, Bill. These are the games Memphis gets geeked up for. You get an SEC team coming into their place and all that stuff. And, I mean, they're going to lay it all on the line. Do they have enough athletes to hang with Mississippi State on the lines of scrimmage?
We'll find out. I mean, Memphis allowed a lot of points to Arkansas State last week, but I'll say this. I mean, I reiterate this. I say this about Mike Leach teams till I'm blue in the face. Awesome underdogs struggle in favorite roles, and this is the exact kind of spot they struggle. 3.5-point road favorite. We all know as Ole Miss fans how tough it can be to win in the Liberty Bowl, especially when it's hot as balls in September. And so I think this is a trap spot. I'd lean Memphis if anybody. I mean, I was all over State last week in Cincy State. I mean, it just comes back to you go back to Mike Leach's whole career. We've got a huge body of work. Texas Tech, Washington State, Mississippi State. When he's a big underdog, they're ferocious, and the games are supposed to win, they struggle. And I mean, I just stand by that analysis. And so I think Memphis has got a shot. It's ironic. State, you know, you think of Leach in the air raid, but it's like a dump-off raid. I mean, they don't have any playmakers. Their defense is – but Arnett's a hell of a defensive coordinator. And so it's like you think of a Leach team, a wide-open air raid. They ain't that. I mean, I was on that under last week pretty big and easily hit it. So I kind of like Memphis, to be honest, in this one. Yeah,
you nailed Mississippi State last week. You got that one. I missed that one bad. I thought NC State would be better than that. I really did. All right, Alabama's at Florida. The media is trying to turn this into this game, and I get it. I don't know about you, but I'm laying these 15 points and not even thinking twice about it.
Man, I lean Bama. I don't know if I'm going to. I'm either going to take Bama small or stay away. The Florida court, I know Richardson, the freshman, has looked unbelievable running the ball, but he's got like Tecmo Bowl numbers. He's over 300 yards on 9 carries.
But that's not how you beat Alabama, Ben.
He's also a true freshman quarterback against Alabama. And I think this Bama defense this year has so much experience. We're seeing a better defense. The only question you'd have is like, can Bryce Young handle the swamp? But I mean, he's number one quarterback in America, you know. I mean, he's –
oh, yeah, come on.
I don't think it's not like he's some bum out there. I mean, he's the favorite for the Heisman Trophy. So I also just think Florida lost so much from last year. I mean, you know, they pushed Bama so hard in that SEC championship game, losing 52-46 with Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts and Tony. Those guys are gone. And so, I mean, I would lean Bama, especially Bama, maybe even Bama 7 or 7.5 in the first half. I think they might come out and choke them out. But I'm either small Bama or passing. That is where I'm at on it.
We mentioned Auburn and Penn State. That line's about 6.5. Auburn at Penn State. We no way to know really anything about Auburn at this point. We know a lot about Penn State because they beat Wisconsin there in Madison. How do you sort of look at this game?
I don't like either quarterback. I don't like Clifford either at Penn State. I mean, he can move, but he's not that good of a passer. On the Penn State side of it, home field should be killer. Wide out, 108,000 strong. Penn State's run defense looked really good against Wisconsin, and that's the key to stopping Auburn. I mean, they're going to run the ball with their four returning linemen, Tank Bigsby. To me, I always hammer the first half unders. This feels like a physical, lower scoring game again. I mean, you got two teams trying to run the ball in weaker passing games in a wild environment. Penn State 6.5, I'm staying away. Like you said, it's hard to know with Auburn. So I think I'm just looking at possibly first half under, a game under here, and just sit back and watch it.
Before we get to any pro games, are there any other college games that you like as a play? And it's kind of a weird schedule, because week one was so good. This kind of feels like we're squeezing in as many of these kind of crummy games as we can before we get into full-fledged.
I got a few. I'm going hard. I know y'all are, for all those following my Twitter at Barstool Mincy. I mean, I'm going high volume on them because that's the Barstool way. Gamble responsibly. We're having fun with it. But I think a couple, I'll just cliff notes. Oklahoma's going to they're going to lay Nebraska's carcasses all over that field. Because Oklahoma, I think it was good for them. That Tulane second half might wake them up. That might have been just what they needed. They're up 37-14 at half. They took their feet off the gas, kind of got away. Nebraska's horrible, and Oklahoma, the thing with Oklahoma and Nebraska, they respect that helmet. That's a long lineage. That's a game they're going to be up for no matter what. They'll never overlook them. So I think they win huge. That's one I'm looking at. Let's see some of the other ones I mentioned. Memphis. You're right in that there's like a lot of okay-ish games this week. There's not like a ton of standouts. I've got a lot of kind of medium plays. So I'll just go with Oklahoma. A lot's been talked about on Cincinnati, Indiana. Cincinnati's super public is a 4-point favorite. I can't figure that one out, so I'm going to stay away from it. It's just such a big game for Cincinnati's program, getting to play Indiana on the road. Indiana was a surprise last year, but we saw in that Outback Bowl, we saw in week one, they're a fraud. So I'd lean Cincinnati even with them being public because Cincinnati's not going to overlook a chance to go on the road and win the Big Ten. So that's one. And then the West Virginia Tech game is interesting because Virginia Tech's number 15 in the country. We all saw them beat North Carolina, yet West Virginia, who struggled, lost to Maryland, is a 3-point favorite. And that looks like a rat line to me. I think Vegas love West Virginia to make them a favorite there. Because you got to think the Joe Publics would be like, oh, Virginia Tech beat North Carolina. West Virginia couldn't beat Maryland. Something smells on that one that makes me like West Virginia. And Neil Brown's a good coach, too.
He is a good coach. He's a really good coach. I have to think that looking at all this realignment, Neil Brown's like, I got to get out of here. I got to get into one of the big leagues, and I don't know.
It's just interesting to me that you think of West Virginia through the years. You think of the Rich Rod offenses and Pat White, Slade, and even Mark Bulger and Geno Smith. This West Virginia plays defense and can't score, which is like the exact opposite of what you always think of that program. But we'll see. I kind of lean that way.
All right, let's get into the NFL. Week 2 in the NFL starts on Thursday night. People will probably we'll push this out on Thursday, but most people will see it on Friday. It's the Giants and the Washington football team. And then Sunday, it's a slate of noon games. It's kind of a weird slate of games. I'm trying to look for something that catches my eye. Vegas at Pittsburgh is an interesting week 1 game. Game, I should say. The Saints at Carolina. The Saints.
That one's very interesting.
They looked great in week 1. And then Kansas City and Baltimore. That's
the Sunday night one. There are a few thoughts I have. The Saints, boy, I mean, how could you not be thrilled with that effort? And this is Sean Payton. I actually took Sean Payton 18-1 to win Coach of the Year before the season because after Ida happened and the fact that the national expectations were the Saints were going to take the step back. Look, I love Drew Brees. I mean, I'm one of his biggest fans. I'm not trying to hear to slander the man, but if you read between the lines, Sean Payton's comments the last 3 or 4 years, he's been ready to have somebody that can push the ball down the field. I mean, he hadn't slided him, but you could just kind of tell he was kind of we're window dressing everything we can do, but all we can do is dump it underneath and not turn the ball over. And now he's got Jameis who can unleash it. And because the Ida and the expectations with the Saints were going to take the step back, if they win 11 or 12 games again, he could be Coach of the Year just because the expectations were lower. So that was why I took that. And love the way they looked. However, man, rough week 1 on injuries. You lose Eric McCoy starting center, Marcus Davenport, and Lattimore, your best corner. So I'm actually looking it over in Saints-Panthers this week because of that. These Saints-Panthers games historically are a little high scoring, a little more wild. I know the Jets lost 19-14, but I think Darnold in Winston. You got two over quarterbacks that might throw it to the other team. Sometimes turnovers build a lot of points too, but fascinating matchup here. I'm really curious because Carolina looks to be much improved in year 2 under Rule and Joe Brady. And then obviously if you're a Saints fan, you got to love the week 1 effort. So I'm really pumped to watch that one. I actually like Pittsburgh in the Vegas game. Vegas winning I know it's early in the year, so you don't want to overblow the traveling, all that, but Monday night, late overtime game, early Sunday kickoff at home in Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's defense will be ready, and it seems like a spot Pittsburgh's got momentum off that Buffalo win, so I kind of lean that direction. The KC Baltimore is fascinating. Kansas City, 8-1 in their last 9 regular season games, 1-8 against the spread. They win and don't cover every week. It's crazy. And so I'm actually kind of looking at, man, I never like betting against Patrick Mahomes. There's just really nothing I hate more than having to pull against him. But I'm looking at Baltimore +4 a little bit on Sunday night.
It was a kind of a funny deal I saw today, Ben. It shows you sometimes media is so desperate to create content. It's who should we be more concerned about more, Buffalo or Tennessee? And it's like, whoa, it's 1 week. Hold up.
1 week.
Yeah, but Buffalo goes to Miami. Tennessee goes to Seattle. Which of those teams at the end is 0-2?
Boy, Buffalo and Miami is a hard one to call because Miami's a weird place to travel. We've seen through the years New England's lost a lot of games down there, and especially early in the year when it's really hot. That's kind of a weird home field, especially for a Buffalo team. So that's one I don't have a strong feel on. I like the Titans to bounce back. I know the Titans had an awful week 1. Taylor Lewan, who's one of our Barstool guys, he got benched. Chandler Jones left his jockstrap on the field, 5 sacks in the game. You never see that in pro football. But Tennessee's a weird team. It's almost like they're better on the road than at home, kind of. And a lot of Ole Miss fans get to watch this AJ DK matchup and how much fun. I look forward to that jersey swap post game that everybody and their mom is going to retweet. But I think Tennessee could bounce back as a 5.5-point underdog. So you would think Buffalo is more likely to win since they're a 3.5-point favorite. But gambling wise, I think I like Tennessee a little more this week.
It's a game nobody else cares about, but I do as a Bears fan who we went to Cincinnati and the Bengals people treated us so great. So I've kind of become my AFC team is the Bengals. Bengals at the Bears. Bengals got a big week 1 win over the Vikings. Oh, yeah. The Bears look terrible, but it was against the Rams. How do you see Cincy in Chicago?
I kind of think Chicago's probably the right side here because Cincinnati, this thing opened at 3.5, is down to 2. I feel like Cincinnati's a little public. Look, I know the Bears didn't look the best, but I like the way they ran the ball. I really like the way David Montgomery looked. The O-line played well. I don't think they're as bad as people think. And it's interesting how they're managing. You got the Andy Dalton playing against his old team thing, and when's Fields going to start and all that stuff. But I kind of lean Chicago here in this one.
Boy, if you're not impressed with the Rams after week 1, you weren't paying attention. They look like the total package with Matthew Stafford. That the defense they have and some of the weapons, and Stafford looks like a kid at Christmas with all the toys he's been given.
Oh, yeah, they looked excellent. And it was fascinating to see the new defensive scheme. So Staley, the defensive coordinator, took the Chargers job. And, he's obviously got a big week 1 win over the football team. But the way they moved Jalen Ramsey from that outside corner to the star, he was just running around like Honey Badger, just making plays all over the field. And, man, I loved what I saw there. Stafford, I said this all offseason. Look, people think Goff to Stafford's an upgrade. It's actually like an upgrade from the floor to the ceiling. I don't think people really understood. McVay is a brilliant offensive mind, but he's had Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff. He's never had anybody like Matthew Stafford. And you look at the weapons. I love Cooper Kupp. I love Robert Woods. We saw the deep ball. Goff, everything was play action. They literally, the whole offense was play action and rollouts to kind of hide his weaknesses. And now that McVay's actually got a guy in Stafford, you're right. They're extremely dangerous. And the Colts, the Wentz week 1, they didn't, Seattle dominated them. They don't really – the playmakers are a little weak. Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton's kind of I kind of think he's a little old and banged up. I don't know if they have enough weapons to hang in this game. The Rams are going to be tough on that fast track.
We started with Ole Miss and Tulane. We'll finish with Tulane. The good news for the Green Wave, and I agree with you, I think they're losing and losing big to Ole Miss, but they do get to head home after this game. They've been in Birmingham for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it's been. They get to head back. I know that they'll be excited to get UAB at their place next week just to play a home game, be back in New Orleans. I know you guys at Barstool are working on some things to help with hurricane relief as well. Can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, we can. And I've actually, and Neal, it's fun doing stuff with you because you got the Louisiana ties too. But we're going to do Hurricane Ida relief shirts that'll be out already by the time this show gets released. They're going to be going for the unified, United Way effort to all the money's going to be going to help Hurricane Ida, destroyed areas. We all know the damage that storm did. And I think there's more of a national understanding because of what happened with the flooding up here in New York, New Jersey. Usually the national hears like, oh, it's another hurricane. Like, okay, you hear that 3 times a year. But now that it hit this area, 1,800 miles away, I think people really understand the impact of the storm, how strong it was when it went 1,800 miles through the U.S. and still caused as much flooding and chaos as it did up here. I mean, I couldn't get to work one day because my street was flooded. I had to hold my tennis shoes up and go bare feet through a couple feet, like a foot of water to make it here because anything for Dave Portnoy, you can't have the excuses. I mean, anything less would be treason, or weakness. So, but I mean, I think people understand, and we're going to, Megan making money, who's out of Lafayette and from Mississippi Coast originally, and I are going to work together. And we're really hoping all the money we're raising with these shirts is going to that. They're back to boot shirts. And, obviously I've got a lot of ties to Louisiana and Tulane. I mean, what heart they're showing. It's their 4th week on the road since Ida. And so, my grandfather's also a Tulane alum. So I got no hate in my heart toward Tulane. Obviously I want Ole Miss to roll this week, but really wish the Green Wave the best the rest of the way.
Ben, as always, thanks for the time. Look forward to visiting with you again next week.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Neal. Appreciate it.
That was Ben Mintz. Appreciate him, his time every week. We have one more guest here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Chase Parham sat down with Julia Aubrey, the director of the Ford Center, to talk about what's going on there. That's brought to you by our friends at Visit Oxford.
I'm excited to be joined by Julia Aubrey, director of the Ford Center here on campus at Ole Miss and in Oxford. Julia, thanks for giving us a little bit of time this morning. I know it's got to be exciting getting back into a fall calendar, a football weekend, just a little bit of normalcy as we've gotten into September now.
Right. Thanks, Chase. We're grateful to be a part of this today.
So I guess let's back up a little bit. I want to talk about what's coming up and don't want to necessarily focus on the past too much, but like all of us, we've all had to adapt and do different things over the course of the last year. What's been the biggest, challenge and then reward of just dealing with 2020 as it was and now getting back to a place where you guys are reopening and having some pretty neat events coming into town?
Yes, thank you. So we have not had a touring show here in a year, and that's very different for us. We're used to having 150 events per year. Those are not all touring shows, but of course, university functions, community functions. So just getting back in the, gear to try to bring in touring artists. And we did that last night, as a matter of fact. So we opened our season last night with the Voices of Mississippi, which was a multimedia project by William Ferris, and it featured Cedric Burnside, Sade Thomas, Luther, and Cody Dickinson. So it was really a great celebration of the music of Mississippi. So that was a wonderful way to open our new season. The big adjustment is trying to stay safe as possible. Our audiences are required to wear masks anytime they're in the building, but we've stopped with the physical distancing. Fortunately, so many people have been vaccinated, and as long as we're staying in masks, we feel like we're creating a pretty safe environment. We still have our HVAC going at a high rate of air exchange. So really, after a whole year of really being under strict guidelines on how to make this work, we're so excited to be back in presenting. And of course, our big thing coming up is this weekend. On Sunday, we have Renee Fleming, who's one of the best sopranos in the world, is coming, and she's doing a special panel called Music in the Mind. What that is her research at the Kennedy Center is about the neuroscience and music and how they help Alzheimer's patients, people with autism, and we're going to examine looking at how music affects children in a positive way. So it's really exciting to have sort of an academic portion of what we do as a presenter, and to have Renee Fleming here guiding that. And then we have 3 people from the region coming in, researchers, and then Dr. Jean Gispen has been advising me as our medical advisor on this. So that's really exciting. So if the people are in town for the game, they can stick around and see this at 4:00 on Sunday, and it's free at the Ford Center. So you don't have to reserve anything, just come in. And again, we do require a mask. And then of course she presents her big concert, her big recital with the pianist the next night, which is Monday at 7:30. So if you want to hang around another day, you can see one of the world's greatest sopranos. And I'm telling you, whether you appreciate classical music or musical theater. She does everything. She does pop, jazz. She's an incredible singer. So we're so excited to have someone of her caliber here at the Ford Center.
And for that event or anything throughout the fall or the spring or anything you guys do that are ticketed, how can people best get tickets? What are the processes for those things?
Well, we just launched our brand new website, so we're excited about that. That's fordcenter.org. So you can go on there and look at all the shows and read about them. You can get onto ticket link through the box office at that way. So you can do everything online, or you can call the box office to order tickets if you want help or have a question. You can come by and pick up the tickets in the Ford Center between 10 and 4 every day, or you can just do it all electronic. So everything's pretty much online. And then you just bring your phone with you that shows the tickets. And it's such an easy way to get your tickets and get here.
We've all dealt with sort of the return to normalcy in different ways, whether it be full attendance at sporting events or people just being able to go back to their jobs or whatnot. Last night, finally getting back, having your first event. I mean, was it, for lack of a better word, emotional? And what was it like to just finally kind of get back into some normalcy yesterday?
It was. I mean, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to have people back in the auditorium and excited about it. And they had such a wonderful time. Everybody came out smiling, after so long of not being able to attend things live. And that's such a unique experience. You can watch things on video, you can watch things on television, movies, but being in the theater with the musicians, it's just a whole different experience. And we had a very nice turnout. I was so thrilled that people were willing to come out and be here and experience all that. And we're excited about the next event. So that was what's wonderful. It was really, for my staff, just to be back in business was just incredible.
Such a great resource all the way around for Ole Miss, for Oxford, for just the local community in so many ways. I know private support is a lot of that. What has the last year been like on just, trying to continue some of those functions as you guys were there?
Right. So we rely on our friends at the Ford Center to help us present, because as a nonprofit, obviously we're not trying to make money, but we're trying not to lose money. So right. That private support helps us. And in reality, the only reason I can bring in Renee Fleming is because Nancy Starnes is paying her fee. So, somebody takes that great of interest to bring something to Oxford that we would normally never have the opportunity to see. We have to thank Nancy for that. And also just overall, corporate sponsors are starting to pick up to try to help us get back in our normal presentation. And we have a really great season, and there's a lot of variety. And I think that's probably what's so powerful is I'm really listening, trying to say, what do people want to hear? I mean, we have Beach Boys coming. Yeah. We have Postmodern Jukebox, Bruce Hornsby. I mean, and Stomp. I mean, these are names and groups that everybody knows. And that I think that people are very excited about that. And then in the spring, the thing was, you talked about how different things are. I've always announced my entire season. This year I couldn't. I just had to do the fall because it's really still slow for things to get started. But we're about to start our spring announcement, and that's all the big musicals, which of course people love the Broadway musicals. We have Waitress, we have Beautiful, Carole King Story, we have An American in Paris, and these are all big Broadway Tony winner shows. So in Oxford, you can actually see anything that you're going to see in Memphis, right, but you don't have to drive to Memphis, and it's in So that's exciting. So we're back in business, and we're so thrilled people are willing to come out to support us.
Yeah, you said a lot of variety. I mean, the Beach Boys, December 11th for that. Bruce Hornsby coming back on November 7th. Stomps November 29th. As far as an overall fall lineup, does it look fairly normal compared to past seasons? I mean, is this something that when you were starting to schedule, you're pleased with the lineup you've been able to put in place for the fall? And how big of a challenge is that just on simply people touring and having options to bring to town?
Well, we lost all our season except we ended our last show was October 6th with Queen's Cartoonists. They were just willing to come out. Everybody else withdrew. Mm-hmm. So I had basically had 2 seasons worth of shows to bring back in, and not everybody was able to return. So what you're seeing is really a culmination of all those seasons of them actually being willing to come back out and tour. So that's part of why it's so chock full of great things is because we had so many to try to reschedule. I mean, some of them are on their fourth date because we had to cancel and reschedule and reschedule. So I think that's why there's such this great variety and why we have so many strong presentations. But it is still similar because we have classical things coming in as well. We have a Fannie Lou Hamer story, which is based on the Mississippi advocate for voting rights. She was very famous. It's sort of a theatrical event. And then we have Andreas Klein and Andreas Wrench, which is more of a concert, and it's classical music, but it's sort of multimedia, very different interests. So really still do have all the things that I normally have, but more so because I had to bring everybody back. Like in the spring, we're also bringing back the Meyer Quartet, which is an amazing jazz blues. They're really amazing group quartet, along with where I have the Memphis Symphony coming in, and then a couple of smaller shows that are, again, classical, instrumental sort of things, but also a pop element there too. So the variety's still there. It's just we have more than usual because I had to bring them all back. And again, not everybody came back. So I don't have ballet this time. They just kind of stopped touring and haven't gotten back into it. But we will be doing that. I mean, I'm already booking for 22, 23.
Obviously, touring shows do well. I have the people in. People are really excited about those kind of things. But what is the goal for variety? When you're trying to lay out what a season looks like, how do you sort of go about figuring out how to make that as diverse and entertaining as possible?
It's really, I have a lot of agents that I have a personal relationship with, and I know they're in kind of specific categories. They'll do classical, they'll do smaller ensembles. I have somebody who does a lot of the pop things, of course, all the Broadway musicals. So I do have those agents, and they send things to me and say, hey, we know your season, and here's something you might be interested in. I listen to my audience, and they're not shy about telling me they like something, or will I consider bringing something in? That's where all these, like Bruce Hornsby, has come from, or Beach Boys, that people really had an appetite for those kinds of groups. And we are, at just under 1,200, we're not going to bring in ZZ Top because we can't possibly bring that kind of group in. But, again, Renee Fleming, whoever thought we would get to have Renee Fleming. Beach Boys has been a 3-year process to try to get their routing to come to Oxford. That's the tough place. We're not a huge venue, and we have to kind of be on the way to somewhere else. But so that's exciting. I mean, every year I'm out just trying to find something different, like Voices of Mississippi. That was an inaugural event that we actually got to help create. And so I'm always looking for something that, and keeping in mind what people are telling me, what our audiences are coming to see. And not everything has to sell out. It doesn't matter. Our really point is to offer our audience something they would normally not have the opportunity to see.
It's a little ways off, but I also don't want to let you go without talking about Holiday Village. Obviously,
Sure.
The event free every year, open to the public, pretty much throughout December, raises funds and collects goods for the local pantry as well. Can you just kind of give an overview for people that have maybe not noticed that, people in town during December, but here in September, what can people expect for that this season?
Sure, we love that because my whole staff gets in on that. I mean, that's one of their favorite things to do. And of course, it involves our community, because the community are the ones that make the gingerbread houses and bring them. And we also expanded it. So it used to just be the gingerbread village, and now it has a miniature village with a train that goes around it. It has a Lego section with Christmas Legos. We have an international table that talks about Hanukkah and other kinds of celebrations during that period. We of course have Santa there, and a tree and a fireplace with stockings on it to really set the children to come in, and that's all free that we provide to they come and take their picture with Santa. And we also still continue our giving, which is to the pantry and goods, or people make donations. So for us, it's a way for the community come in to the Ford Center, but it's us for an outreach, and for us to give back to the community. And it's free. We only ask that you bring in canned goods or make a small donation. So we have a lot of fun with that. It's just one of our favorite things to do each year.
That's in December. Before that, obviously, Renee Fleming here coming up on Sunday and Monday for those different events. Plenty of different things on the schedule for the Ford Center. You can go to fordcenter.org, the new website, as Julia mentioned, for that. Everything from how to support, directions if you're curious about different things along with the building, as well as events, tickets, and much more. So it's pretty exciting. Julia, thanks for the time today, and I look forward to a great season for you guys.
Thank you so much. We appreciate being a part of this.
Thanks to Julia Aubrey and Chase there for their time. That does it for the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Hope you guys enjoyed that. A little bit of everything for you. For those that are on the live stream, we'll have hand-raised guys here in about an hour, maybe a little less than that. And that'll be the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast as well. We'll be back with the MPW Digital Postgame Show, probably, 10:15, 10:30, let's hope, on Saturday night. Ole Miss and Tulane kickoff at 7 at Vaught Hemingway Stadium in Oxford, and we'll be with you guys after the game, probably for quite some time, to talk about it. We'll talk to Jeffrey Wright, we'll talk to Brian Rippey, we'll take your calls, and more. Thanks for being with us. Talk to you soon.